Try to imagine a night sky you thought you had already memorized, every star mapped, measured, and charted to its farthest reaches. And then, suddenly, an intruder enters the field of vision, a stranger from the interstellar dark, carrying the name 3I divided by Atlas, shimmering faint yet persistent, as if holding a secret that has drifted for billions of years just to arrive here. Atlas was first recorded in mid-2024, not as a random accident, but as if the universe had deliberately chosen this precise moment to remind us that human knowledge is still nothing more than a grain of sand. It did not flicker at random like familiar constellations, but appeared with the cold precision of a cosmic dance, choreographed long before we were here to see it. Its trajectory was not the careless scatter of debris from the asteroid belt. It sliced through the architecture of the solar system with confidence, as if following a script written at the dawn of time. For decades, astronomers have puzzled over how giant planets could form so quickly in distant star systems. The math never quite aligned, the timelines were always too brief, and the gaps in theory were like tears that refused to mend in the textbooks of astrophysics. But then Atlas arrived, carrying with it a strange chemical signature, like a cosmic manual, a formula too precise to dismiss. Carbon dioxide dominated where water should have reigned, evoking landscapes frozen, alien, and far older than any comet our solar system had ever known. Atlas looked less like a comet and more like a celestial seed, drifting quietly among the stars, waiting for the right nursery in which to bloom. And with each new observation, wonder shifted into unease. If Atlas truly was a seed, then who or what had sown it? If it were purely natural, its existence would force us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about the pace and mechanics of planetary birth. But if it was designed an object cloaked in cosmic dust, then we were no longer innocent spectators. We had become characters in a play written by someone else, a drama we were never invited to join. That thought pressed heavily against the chest, a silent but unyielding dread. And yet, alongside the fear, a fragile hope lingered, that Atlas was not a threat but a messenger, reminding us that intelligence was never an earthly accident, but a common thread woven into the very structure of the universe. Every telescope turned its gaze toward it, from the massive instruments in orbit to the observatories rooted in stone, and all recorded the same paradox. On the surface, Atlas behaved like a comet, erupting, shining, scattering sunlight in ways we thought we understood. But under closer scrutiny, every detail refused to fit the template. Its dust plumes did not trail behind, but leaned toward the sun, like a curtain against the wind. Its spectrum blazed with nickel but remained eerily silent in iron. And its orbit, far from chaotic, aligned with planetary rendezvous points with a precision too exact for coincidence. Each anomaly, taken in isolation, might have been dismissed, but together they wove a tapestry of mystery that made the imagination tremble, as if brushing against an answer too profound for words. Standing under this sky, you could feel the pull between two poles, reverence and unease. Atlas existed right at that boundary, forcing us to hold two irreconcilable feelings at once: awe and curiosity, because it mirrored the unknown back at us, a reflection of mysteries far beyond our finite lives. Yet, beneath the shimmer of its wonder, lay a troubling question. What if this was not nature's accident, but technology's signature? What if we were watching a disguised probe, a silent envoy passing through our cosmic neighborhood? The thought was as chilling as the sudden hush in a darkened room. And still, parallel to that fear, a glimmer of hope burned. The hope was that whatever purpose Atlas carried, it was not conquest but connection, not imposed silence, but a quiet invitation for us to learn how to listen to the universe's deepest whispers. If part 1 was the breathtaking overture, then part 2 is the moment humanity realized Atlas was not merely a distant speck of light, but a cosmic riddle etched deliberately into the night sky. For only weeks after its discovery, detailed observations revealed its path was not random at all. Instead, it resembled a voyage long charted in advance, pausing at each waypoint of the solar system with unsettling precision. From its near brush with Mars, to its concealment behind the Sun, and then its quiet trajectory toward Jupiter's threshold, every motion of Atlas beat like the measured strokes of a cosmic drum, ringing with intention too deliberate to deny. We are used to chaos in the heavens, asteroids tumbling off course, comets fragmenting into shards, dust streams scattered without pattern. And yet Atlas behaved like a dancer on the grand stage of space, every step aligned to the rhythm of an unseen choreographer. That image fractured the scientific community. One side insisted it was nothing more than an extraordinary coincidence, a grand accident. The other side, though reluctant, conceded that the odds were far too slim to call it a chance. And within that gap of disagreement, unease crept in. Had we stumbled upon a hidden guidance system buried beneath its frozen veil of dust? Infrared telescopes recorded strange anomalies in Atlas's chemistry. Instead of being saturated with water vapor like most comets, it erupted with carbon dioxide even while still far from the sun, in regions of space where it should have lain dormant. It was like watching a seed sprout in darkness, without light, without the warmth required. Astonishment was the first reaction. No celestial body in our solar system had ever displayed such behavior. But curiosity quickly followed. Could this be the primal material, the base ingredient, designed to seed life from one planet to another? The astonishment did not stop there. When scientists analyzed the reflected spectrum of Atlas, they found traces of nickel. While iron, its natural companion, was nearly absent. It was difficult to fathom, because in nature, nickel and iron almost always appear together. They are like twin notes in a cosmic harmony, inseparable. And yet here, one note resonated while the other was silenced. Some compared it to a symphony in which a passage had been deliberately altered, an artificial pause inserted to challenge the listener. And it was at this realization that anxiety deepened. Were we standing before the imprint of an intelligence, an invisible hand that had intervened in the natural score of the cosmos? Yet along with the anxiety, a wave of hope surged as well. For if Atlas was truly a disguised message, perhaps it was not a warning, but an invitation. A door cracked open for humanity to step into a new stage of understanding. Much like the first time humans heard the beating of their own hearts through a stethoscope, we were at once terrified and exhilarated. Atlas might be such a moment, a revelation that unsettles us with our smallness, yet ignites the vision that intelligence is not alone upon this cosmic sea. Tonight, when you look up, you will not only see the familiar constellations handed down by ancestors. You will see a solitary traveler following its cold trajectory, yet carrying with it the light of unanswered questions. It is at once a mirror, reflecting our ignorance, and a lighthouse, guiding us nearer to the mystery of existence itself. And at that very intersection, human emotion is stretched to its peak. Awe, curiosity, fear, and hope, blending into a symphony of feeling that Atlas compels us all to hear. But what made Atlas a riddle was not only its orbit or its chemistry, it was also in the way it interacted with light. Polarization studies revealed that when sunlight struck Atlas's dust, the reflection followed a pattern never before seen in any comet of the solar system. Instead of the familiar polarization signatures, Atlas traced peculiar curves, like cryptic characters written across an ancient manuscript, a language no one had yet learned to read. This phenomenon led many researchers to exclaim, "Atlas is not merely an object, it is an optical message." We don't verlezen the Fried, Philletries and the Kumpfing. We don't verlezen the Fried, Philletries and the Slave. Picture that, a speck of cosmic dust, seemingly ordinary, becoming the blackboard of the universe, where light inscribes invisible letters. Was this merely the natural result of formation in a frozen environment? Or was it a sophisticated encryption, embedded in both orbit and light, waiting for a civilization curious enough to decode it? That question opened a storm of emotion. On one hand, it seeded fear. If this was an interstellar cipher, were we on the verge of unlocking a door better left untouched? On the other hand, it sparked hope. Perhaps Atlas was humanity's first step into a dialogue with a cosmos greater than ourselves. Atlas was not without precedent. Before it, we had seen Oumuamua in 2017, a strangely shaped object that sped through the solar system and vanished. Then came 2I divided by Borisov, a comet from beyond the stars that behaved much like our familiar visitors. But Atlas was different. It did not simply pass by. It lingered at crucial points, as if marking checkpoints. It was at once alien and familiar, a fusion of the explainable and the unexplainable. And it was in that very fusion that humanity felt a wonder unlike anything before. We began to look at Atlas not only through telescopic glass, but through the eyes of philosophy. If it was indeed a seed, then the next question was, what was it sowing? The raw material for planets, organic compounds to spark life? Or perhaps ideas themselves, the concept that the universe holds memory and strategies of its own to preserve its abundance? If so, Atlas was the outstretched hand of the cosmos, scattering seeds across the starfields, like an ancient farmer casting grain across an endless plain. The thought was chilling in its vastness, yet filled with hope that humankind, too, might be part of that great harvest. And yet, even as hope rose, unease refused to loosen its grip. For if a design lay behind Atlas, then what was its motive? Was it an act of generosity to share life, or a silent strategy of some hidden civilization, scattering seeds that were both gifts and territorial markers? The question denied us peace. It turned Atlas into an existential mirror. In its glow, we saw our own inner struggle between the yearning to understand and the fear of being controlled. Night after night, as fresh data streamed back from telescopes, those emotions intensified. Each number, each graph, each blurred image was another missing fragment of a puzzle. None offered a complete picture. They only teased our imagination, pulling us deeper into the labyrinth of possibilities. And within that labyrinth, wonder and curiosity became the torches lighting our way. Fear was the shadow clinging to every step. Hope was the door at the corridor's end, glowing, though we could not yet tell if it would open to paradise or to an abyss. As time passed, Atlas continued along its cold and silent orbit, yet in the human mind, it had become more a symbol than an object. Every scientific paper, every public debate, every new image returned from telescopes added another layer of meaning, weaving Atlas into a tapestry made of both data and emotion. People no longer asked merely, "What is it?" but began to wonder, "What is it trying to say to us?" It was at that turning point that awe evolved into a deep thirst for knowledge, like a traveler who has tasted a single drop of water in the desert and can no longer stop searching for the spring. What was frightening was that the answer could fall at two opposite extremes. On one hand, Atlas might simply be a wandering shard of ice and rock, by chance carrying unusual traits, reminding us that the universe still holds countless surprises beyond prediction. But on the other hand, Atlas could be a deliberate signal, a letter sent across interstellar space. A letter not written in ink and paper, but in light, dust, and curves of orbit. A letter signed not by any individual, but by an unseen civilization patient enough to send a message that might take thousands of years to reach its recipient. Suspended between these possibilities, the human heart wavered, anxious that we had been drawn into a game far beyond our comprehension, and hopeful that we had just been invited into the greatest dialogue ever conceived. Some scientists bluntly warned, we should remain silent. If Atlas is an observing eye, then every signal we send might be a confession. Yet some voices argued the opposite. If it is a doorway, refusing to step through only traps us in the narrow room of our present knowledge. These opposing views did not cancel each other out. They coexisted, like the two poles of a magnet, keeping the discussion about Atlas perpetually tense and magnetic. Humanity wanted at once to pull it closer for exploration, and to push it away to preserve the fragile sense of safety we still cling to. The only certainty was this: Atlas had changed the way we looked at the universe. Once, interstellar objects were regarded only as passing guests, drifting through the solar system and vanishing into the void. But Atlas was different. It did not simply pass, it carved a mark into collective memory. It made each person who looked up at the sky ask, is that a sign of life from afar, or only a trick of nature? And that question, though unanswered, was already enough to shake the foundations of our understanding. Sometimes, it is the question itself, not the answer, that is the true gift the cosmos bestows. In the silence between headlines, in the darkness of night spent observing, Atlas seemed to whisper, "You are not alone." But to know whether you have companions, you must dare to face the vastness. You must dare to listen to the silence. It was both a warning and an invitation. It left us awestruck by the boldness of the universe, curious about its deliberate ambiguity, unsettled by its uncertainty, and hopeful for the possibility that, across this gulf of space, there might be an answer waiting. And so, in what seemed like a fleeting moment of 2024, amid the endless flow of human events, Atlas became a spiritual scientific milestone. It was not just a drifting body of ice and rock, but a melody without notes that humanity was compelled to hear. It reminded us that the universe is not only a cold expanse, but also a mirror reflecting our thirst for knowledge, our fear before the infinite, and our hope that existence itself is not a lonely accident, but one note in the eternal symphony of creation. From the very moment the first observations of 3I divided by Atlas were made public, the global audience stopped short in wonder. A third interstellar object had appeared, and this time we had the rare chance to observe it early, to follow its orbit day by day, instead of catching only a fleeting glimpse as it slipped beyond reach. But as the data began to pile up, a hypothesis surfaced, cold, audacious, slicing through humanity's sense of safety like a knife. Atlas might not be a comet at all, but a probe, an interstellar reconnaissance craft, disguised as stone and ice. At first, the word sounded like something lifted from science fiction, and yet its orbital curves and spectral traces made the idea far harder to dismiss. The more it was spoken aloud, the stronger the shiver grew. When we look up at the sky, are we only observing, or are we being observed in return? The first evidence came from its trajectory. Instead of plunging recklessly through space like most wandering interstellar visitors, Atlas appeared to follow a course with precision too uncanny to ignore. In October 2024, it swept past Mars at the exact moment when numerous orbiters were active. At the end of that month, it disappeared behind the Sun precisely when ground-based telescopes were blind, leaving only a handful of spaceborne instruments capable of tracking it. And as March 2025 approached, Atlas steered directly toward Jupiter, home to many of humanity's probes and observation stations. The sequence resembled less the path of a random drifter and more the itinerary of a survey mission, with each waypoint aligned to where human technology happened to reside. Few could honestly call that a pure coincidence. Imagine if we ourselves sent a probe into a distant star system. We would surely choose a path that passed each planet, hid when necessary, and took advantage of vantage points to scan for data. Seen through that lens, Atlas no longer looked like inert ice, and Rocket resembled a silent watcher. It mirrored almost exactly the strategy humans themselves would use to study another civilization. That symmetry unsettled researchers, for if true, Atlas was not a mere interstellar guest by chance, but the unmistakable sign of another intelligence, cloaked in cosmic dust to evade our suspicion. In that instant, emotion swelled into a double tide. On one side, astonishment tinged with dread. The idea of an invisible eye watching us from afar gave many the eerie sensation of being stared at in the dark. On the other side lay scientific caution, the reminder that even the most improbable outcomes are not impossible, that a handful of orbital coincidences could not be treated as definitive proof. Reason demanded our feet stay planted, resisting the pull of imagination toward reckless conclusions. And yet skepticism alone was not enough to extinguish curiosity. In fact, it only stoked the fire brighter. If Atlas truly was a probe, then what was its mission? What data was it collecting? And more importantly, did it care about us, about humanity? These questions reverberated not only in the halls of science, but in the hearts of millions following the story. A frozen body, small and distant, and yet it managed to pull an entire species into a labyrinth of feeling, trembling in fear, burning with curiosity, and steadied by doubt. And in that very convergence, Atlas became a mirror, reflecting both our fragility and our yearning in the face of the vast universe. If Atlas's precise orbit was the first lightning bolt tearing through the sky of human certainty, then the spectral data and images that followed were the fuel poured onto the fire of suspicion. The more scientists observed, the more Atlas refused to behave like any comet ever recorded. Instead of releasing a glittering tail streaming away from the sun, Atlas displayed a forward-facing halo, as though its dust were being pulled against the expected flow, forming a strange torch pointed straight into the heart of the solar system. This phenomenon immediately ignited debate. Some argued it was nothing more than the chaotic result of uneven eruptions. When surface temperatures vary, one patch of ice may vaporize more strongly, creating an unusual plume. But to supporters of the probe hypothesis, what they saw looked like a design. To them, light bending toward the sun resembled an optical antenna, a scanning or communication system carefully disguised in cosmic dust. The thought sent a chill into the room. Were we witnessing technology dressed in the costume of nature? The deeper the analysis went, the stranger the traces became. Atlas's absorption spectrum showed clear evidence of nickel, but almost no iron. In nature, these two elements are twins, nearly inseparable. Why then would Atlas select to reveal one and not the other? For the cautious, it was a matter of observational limits. Iron might exist but not radiate at the wavelengths our instruments captured. But for those who believed in the probe theory, it looked like a fingerprint deliberately altered, a signal that the material beneath the dust was processed, not the raw debris of creation. These debates only fueled two opposing emotional currents. On one side stood the firm ground of scientific skepticism. Every anomaly must first be tested against natural models. History had taught us this lesson many times, from the pulsars, once mistaken for alien beacons, to Tabby's star, rumored to be a megastructure that rushing to label the unknown can corrode the credibility of science itself. On the other side, however, awe mixed with fear kept pressing at the door. What if this time was different? What if Atlas was not a coincidence at all, but an unseen eye scanning us from the dark? At that crossroads, curiosity erupted. Research teams around the globe rushed to schedule observations, widen their spectrum analysis, and even propose small probes to intercept it directly. They longed to test whether the anomalies were truly technological signatures. Every new image, every spectral chart, though far from conclusive, drew the public closer, hearts trembling with both dread and excitement. Atlas was no longer just a peculiar comet. It had become cosmic theatre, where each piece of data played like a line of dialogue, and humanity sat in the audience, eager yet uneasy, unsure of how the play would end. In the silence of space, Atlas continued its path as if indifferent to the storm of emotions it stirred, yet that very indifference made it more unsettling. Silence can be a strategy. A true probe would never need to announce itself. It would only need to observe, to record, and then vanish, leaving behind a planet drowning in questions with no answers. And this is why, whenever Atlas's name was spoken, people felt both overwhelmed by wonder and gripped by an uncanny dread, as though they had become subjects in a vast experiment, without ever knowing who was watching from behind the curtain. If orbital paths and spectral data had already seeded unease in the human mind, the dark forest hypothesis turned Atlas into a full-blown philosophical nightmare. The idea springs from a principle as simple as it is terrifying. In a dark forest, every creature stays silent, because the one that makes noise first becomes prey. If the universe itself is such a forest, then the silence of civilizations is not proof of absence, but of survival. And within that picture, Atlas was no longer just a harmless rock drifting through the solar system. It could be a silent hunter, or at the very least, an unblinking eye watching, waiting, recording. That image alone sent shivers through many. An object passes through our skies, emitting no radio signals, betraying no signs of life, behaving only like a comet. But it was precisely this performance of normalcy that made it so frightening. In a dark forest, camouflage is the surest survival strategy. And if Atlas was truly a probe launched by some distant intelligence, then its most perfect tactic would be to make us believe it was nothing more than a random celestial body. The fear multiplied. If it could pass by unnoticed, how many others have drifted past without our awareness? Yet science demands sobriety. Skepticism answered quickly. The dark forest is only a hypothesis born from literature, not a proven framework of physics. To attach it to Atlas might simply be human imagination, projecting its own fear onto the cosmos. But even the staunchest skeptics admitted, Atlas had a way of making composure difficult to maintain. It raised questions beyond mathematics, beyond spectroscopy, reaching into the depths of existential dread that science often tries to avoid. And in that space, a third emotion emerged, an eagerness to explore. If the dark forest idea held even a grain of truth, then Atlas was not only a potential threat, it was also a vital clue about how other civilizations endure. It offered us a mirror into our own survival strategies. If tomorrow humanity were to send a probe into an alien star system, what would we choose? Would we broadcast openly, or disguise our vessel as a block of ice and rock, drifting in silence? That question shook many, because it no longer belonged to the realm of alien speculation. It was a scenario we ourselves might one day enact. Beneath the silent sky, Atlas kept moving, voiceless, but each step along its orbit reverberated like the whisper of a predator. Observers on Earth, even those firmly anchored in reason, confessed to feeling the chill of that vision. A celestial body, masquerading as a comet, carrying invisible eyes, quietly recording everything it saw from our satellites, to our radio transmissions, to the glow of our cities. And when it finally departed, we would have no way of knowing whether it left behind only emptiness, or a report already dispatched into the darkness of space. It was precisely this feeling awe entwined with fear that transformed Atlas into a symbol far beyond ordinary scientific value. It became a psychological test for all of humanity. Can we accept the possibility of another gaze within this dark forest? Do we have the courage to keep searching, even if it means admitting that we too may be hunted? And within those questions, burning curiosity continued to drive us forward. Fear and doubt lingered, but still, we longed to know what, in truth, is Atlas. The debates around Atlas did not stop at its orbit or the dark forest hypothesis. They soon converged on a more unsettling question. Was there any sign of technology hidden within its strange behavior? For if there was, Atlas would no longer be an astronomical curiosity, but direct evidence of deliberate intervention. And that idea alone filled the world with both trembling fear and electric anticipation. The first sign was Atlas's suspicious stability. Comets are notorious for their instability. When interior ice sublimates, the jets of gas cause them to tumble erratically, shifting unpredictably. Yet Atlas seemed to maintain an uncanny balance. Its orbit did not wobble chaotically, but adjusted smoothly, as though some unseen navigation system were quietly correcting every minor deviation. For believers in the probe theory, this was evidence of hidden guidance technology. For skeptics, it was nothing more than a rare natural equilibrium that we had happened to witness by chance. The second sign lay in its outgassing. Observers noted that Atlas's venting did not occur at random, but appeared in cycles. It was as though Atlas were breathing with a steady rhythm, not too fast, not too slow, more like a machine operating than a chemical reaction unfolding. To many, the phenomenon resembled a heartbeat, a mechanical pulse within a cold shell. Yet to preserve objectivity, scientists stressed that such a rhythm could just as easily be a coincidence, the byproduct of pressure building and releasing beneath its icy surface. Once again, skepticism pulled us back to Earth, but not strongly enough to extinguish the fire of imagination. Some spectral data even revealed faint flashes of light, flickering briefly before vanishing, inconsistent with normal cometary eruptions. Some dismissed these as noise, artifacts of flawed processing, but to those desperate for answers, the flashes looked like encoded signals, short, ambiguous, but patterned. The hypothesis sounded like science fiction, yet it sparked a wave of awe tinged with dread. If Atlas was transmitting, then it was not only observing, it was sending. And the question that chilled many was, sending to whom? Even Atlas's shape stoked suspicion. High-resolution images revealed it was not entirely irregular, like most comets. Its surface showed unusually flat reflective patches, as if plates had been embedded among its rugged contours. Skeptics quickly suggested these could be slabs of ice, polished smooth by the solar wind. But the human imagination could not help but picture shattered solar panels, or fragments of an ancient structure buried beneath cosmic dust. The thought was unsettling. Perhaps Atlas was the relic of technology, a silent machine still carrying on its journey after eons. Of course, no evidence was strong enough to conclude. Every hypothesis had its counterargument, every anomaly its possible natural explanation. Yet it was precisely this ambiguity that made Atlas irresistible. It became a double mirror. For skeptics, it reflected the caution and discipline science demands. For dreamers, it reflected the tantalizing possibility that we were standing before the first true sign of extraterrestrial intelligence. And wherever the truth lay, Atlas had already changed the way we looked at the sky. From now on, every interstellar visitor would arrive with a haunting question. Is this truly ice and stone or the disguised eyes of the cosmos? In that liminal space, three emotions once again converged. Awe, edged with fear, at the thought of hidden technology cloaked in ice. Scientific skepticism grounds us, warning against falling into the labyrinth of speculation. And the thrill of discovery, pushing us to launch more satellites, aim more telescopes, and seek whether 3I divided by Atlas was truly a probe in the dark, or merely a psychological test the universe had set before us. Suppose Atlas truly were a probe sent by an alien civilization, a scenario that at first sounds absurd, but once the imagination begins to dwell on it, its implications become suffocatingly chilling. For in that moment, we would no longer be passive observers, we would be the observed. And being observed is no longer a scientific curiosity, it is a reversal of roles, turning our entire planet into a colossal laboratory, with humanity itself as the unwitting subject of study. If a civilization advanced enough to launch Atlas had reached us, then every signal we have ever broadcast into space, radio waves from the earliest transmitters, satellite beacons, Even the electromagnetic glow of our cities could already be collected with ease. We live behind what we believe is a veil of privacy, but in truth, it may be a glass wall, revealing every detail of our existence. The thought alone makes people shudder. Perhaps every moment of our lives has already been recorded in some cosmic report, archived far beyond the reach of our imagination. The second implication is even more unnerving. If Atlas is a probe, then it is unlikely to be alone. In countless models of science fiction, probes rarely act in isolation. They are links in a vast reconnaissance network. A single probe passing through our solar system today could be only the tip of the iceberg, signaling that dozens, even hundreds, of others drift silently among the stars, monitoring civilizations across the galaxy. That possibility leaves humanity with the inescapable feeling that we are part of a larger game, one in which the rules are written by others. And the most unsettling question is this: are they watching to befriend us or to control us? Even within this chilling vision, science holds a line of reason. Skeptical voices remind us that every anomaly can still be explained naturally. Stability, trajectory, even rhythmic outgassing, all may simply be the byproducts of coincidence. Astronomy's history is full of cautionary tales, where humans rush to attach meaning to the unknown. This vigilance guards us from plunging into blind fear, yet awe laced with dread remains, lingering like shadows just beyond the lamp's glow, impossible to completely banish. Paradoxically, the deeper the fear, the stronger the pull of curiosity. If Atlas is truly a probe, then this may be our only chance for centuries to brush against the technology of another civilization. It would be like a cosmic key drifting past our doorstep, and the question becomes, do we dare reach out to grasp it, or do we shrink back, paralyzed by fear? Some researchers have proposed bold missions, small craft sent to shadow Atlas, to gather data up close, perhaps even to land and collect samples. Dangerous, yes, but the vision sparks a feeling no other event could summon: the exhilaration of standing at the threshold of entirely new knowledge. Imagine, for a moment, that one day a telescope sends back undeniable images, regular structures, etched patterns resembling circuitry, or even an artificial signal pulsing from within Atlas. That instant would mark a turning point for all human civilization. It would shatter our long-held belief in solitude, even as it expanded our vision without limits. We would be terrified, enraptured, humbled, and uplifted, all at once, our smallness undeniable, yet our hope magnified, knowing that intelligence echoes across the vastness of the universe. And for this reason, despite fear, despite skepticism, humanity continues to turn its lenses toward Atlas, because deep down, we know that truth, whether frozen and merciless, or radiant and wondrous, is worth more than silence. And Atlas, probe or comet, has already forced us into confrontation with ourselves. Will humanity choose to live forever in fear, or take the step forward into discovery? When the hypothesis that Atlas might be a probe began to spread, the world seemed to be standing before a colossal mirror. In it, not only was Atlas scrutinized, but humanity itself was exposed through its multifaceted reactions. The scientific community wrestled between caution and excitement, the media turned it into a daily cliffhanger, and the public swung between two poles: fear and fascination. At international conferences, the most level-headed researchers repeatedly called for restraint. They reminded everyone that there was no evidence strong enough to confirm Atlas as an artificial object. Every piece of data from its orbit to its spectrum could still be explained by natural models, however complex. For them, premature labeling would weaken science itself, making us prey to the ghosts of our imagination. This was the voice of scientific skepticism, struggling to keep humanity steady amid a storm of emotion. Yet caution could not hold back the tide of curiosity spreading outward. Global media seized the opportunity. Atlas appeared on magazine covers, on news broadcasts, across social media feeds. Every anomaly, no matter how minor, was magnified into a technological clue. Headlines exploded. The eye in the dark? An interstellar spy? Who is watching Earth? This dramatization fanned awe laced with fear among the public, transforming Atlas from a block of ice and rock into the protagonist of a story, part science, part myth. Within the crowd, some people fell into genuine anxiety. They asked, if we are being watched, what danger might be approaching? Should we stop transmitting radio signals into space, cut off all contact attempts humanity has made? They invoked the dark forest scenario, fearing that Atlas might be only the first snare, a reconnaissance tool before a greater storm descends. For them, silence was no longer just an option, it was a survival strategy. Conversely, another segment greeted the news with shining eyes. To them, Atlas could be a golden opportunity, proof that intelligence is not confined to Earth. If it were a probe, then discovering it would mark the threshold of a new epoch, one in which humans are no longer alone. They saw Atlas as a ticket into a vaster cosmos, a door long yearned for but never opened. In them, the thrill of discovery overshadowed fear, sparking bold ideas, sending a spacecraft to intercept Atlas, transmitting a reply, even preparing a program of cosmic diplomacy for the future. This division reflected the dual nature of our species. Half of us tremble at the possibility of a stronger, wiser watcher tracking our every move. The other half burns with the desire to cross the boundary, willing to risk everything for an answer. Atlas, through its silence, had become a test of humanity's survival instincts and its longing to reach beyond. And perhaps it is precisely this reaction that makes Atlas so important. For even if it is only an unusual comet, it has already exposed our deepest essence, fragile yet curious, fearful yet yearning. It is no longer just an object of study, but a mirror of the collective psyche. And as the public keeps debating and laboratories continue parsing data, one unshakable question echoes in our shared mind. If there truly is another pair of eyes looking at us through Atlas, how will we answer that gaze? As the debate over Atlas stretched on from laboratories to coffee houses, from international conferences to online forums, people began to realize that the central question was no longer simply, is it a probe or not? The deeper question was, who are we when faced with that possibility? For Atlas, whether a natural comet or an artificial object, had already placed humanity in an unprecedented position. For the first time, we were forced to confront our place in the universe, and to admit that perhaps we are not the only ones holding the privilege of observation. In the bleakest vision, if Atlas were indeed a probe, it could mean we have already been discovered, and in the framework of the dark forest, discovery equates to danger. This fear, like a ghost, haunted our collective imagination. Were we prey without even realizing we had stepped into a trap? Yet at the same time, that hypothesis demanded our maturity. It forced us to understand that the silence of the cosmos is not emptiness but strategy. To endure, humanity could no longer afford to be naive. We would have to learn to balance seeking with concealing. On the opposite end, in a more hopeful vision, if Atlas were truly a probe, it might also be proof that we are not alone. It would be like an indirect invitation. You are not the only ones. Others are watching too. And perhaps that gaze is not meant to threaten but to connect. Perhaps Atlas is a message in a bottle cast across the interstellar sea, not to destroy, but to wait for a curious hand to open it. Here, the thrill of discovery flared brilliantly. If the universe is vast enough, if intelligence can bloom in many places, then meeting one another is not a risk, but a testament to the richness of existence. And between these two extremes, shadow and light, fear and hope, humanity saw Atlas for what it truly was, an existential mirror. It did not merely reflect dry physical data, but the entire spectrum of our collective psyche, our defensive instincts, our fear of threat, but also our longing to break boundaries. Atlas spoke no words, yet its silence forced us to speak, to confront the question, what path will we choose in this immense cosmos? What is striking is that, regardless of the truth, Atlas had already achieved something rare. It made humanity look up together. In an age when people are consumed by earthly worries, war, economics, climate change, the arrival of Atlas reminded us of the greater question, who are we in the universe? It reawakened the capacity for wonder. We thought we had lost the ability to pause, to tremble, to hope. And that may be its deepest philosophical gift. Even if Atlas were only an unusual comet, it would still serve as a lesson. Sometimes the universe does not send us answers, but questions so vast they force us to change. The question is not only about the nature of Atlas, but about our own. Do we have the courage to keep searching, knowing that other eyes may dwell in the dark? Do we have the wisdom to remain silent when necessary, and the bravery to speak when we are ready? When the debates finally quieted, Atlas continued drifting, silent as it had been from the start. It neither confirmed nor denied. It left us with awe, tinged with fear, with the grounding pull of scientific skepticism, and with the fire of curiosity that refuses to fade. And perhaps in that very silence, Atlas had fulfilled its role, not as a test of our intelligence, but as a test of the heart of our civilization. Right after the heated debates over the probe hypothesis, the scientific community returned to its most familiar weapon, data. And it was here that 3I divided by Atlas continued to sow astonishment. Every measurement, every chart, every spectrum resembled a fragment of a mirror, each reflecting part of the truth, but refusing to fit into a complete picture when assembled. The shock began the very first moment telescopes captured its atmospheric composition. Instead of releasing plumes of water vapor like traditional comets of the solar system, Atlas expelled carbon dioxide at levels many times higher than water, even while it was still far from the sun, at a distance where the heat should not have been sufficient to trigger sublimation. This defied every sublimation model taught in textbooks. In cometary physics, water is always the dominant volatile, the switch that starts the engine when a body nears the sunday. Yet Atlas behaved as though its system were inverted, prioritizing the release of CO2, a gas that normally becomes prominent only close to perihelion. Analysts were forced to reconstruct thermodynamic scenarios. Perhaps Atlas's internal structure was unlike any classical comet, with frozen CO2 lying just beneath the surface, while water was buried deeper. But that hypothesis itself raised another question. Why was its structure so different? Did it originate in a realm of extreme cold, or follow a formation path entirely apart from what we know? Alongside chemical analysis, data from spectroscopic observations delivered equal shock. Atlas's reflective spectrum failed to match any established template. Instead of the familiar absorption bands tied to silicate dust and water ice, it displayed an anomalous ratio of nickel, while iron, nickel's natural companion, was nearly absent. Within the solar system, iron and nickel are considered inseparable twins found together in nearly all bodies. Their separation in Atlas stunned many researchers. The cautious suggested this could be spectral selection, iron perhaps existing but not radiating strongly at the observed wavelengths. Yet others admitted uneasily, the result did not feel right. Here, scientific astonishment was no longer the joyful kind but the disquieting sense that something was off, a heavy knock against decades of stable knowledge. Not only its chemistry but also its polarization branch, the way sunlight became polarized after striking Atlas's dust-defied models. Ordinary comets follow a well-documented polarization curve. The farther from the sun, the more the angle shifts predictably. Atlas, however, traced an entirely divergent curve, as though its dust grains had unusual shapes or microstructures never seen before. Some models speculated its grains were fractal, branching at extreme complexity, causing light to scatter chaotically. If true, Atlas would be a rare specimen, opening a window onto the diversity of galactic material. But if not, what force had created this deviation? With each dataset, the emotion spreading through the research community was not only excitement, but astonishment, edged with dread. Every discovery pressed science closer to its breaking point. Scientists found themselves both eager for more and wary of confronting shards that refused to align. And in this twilight of certainty, two secondary emotions arose quietly. Skepticism. Could these anomalies be subtle fingerprints of something artificial, disguised as natural? And caution. Whatever the imagination suggested, science must never outrun the data. Observation must continue, testing must continue, sorting what is real from what is illusion. Atlas, through its silence and its strangeness, had turned every measurement into a challenge. It forced humanity to be astonished and tremble, to restrain itself and yet crave more, and this was only the beginning of the evidence that would hold the world's gaze. After analyzing Atlas's chemical composition and spectral patterns, scientists turned to direct observations of its activity cycles. And once again, what they found refused to align with any cometary model ever known. Telescopes recorded that Atlas's outgassing did not fluctuate chaotically as predicted, but instead followed strange repeating intervals almost like a pulse, rather than the random sublimation process, where underground ice suddenly meets heat and erupts. Atlas released gases in periodic bursts, steady enough to leave researchers stunned. In astrophysics, this phenomenon demanded explanation through sublimation physics, combined with thermodynamic modeling of its interior. One hypothesis suggested that beneath Atlas's surface lay sealed chambers of ice, fracturing cyclically as pressure reached a threshold. But for such near-mechanical regularity to occur, Those chambers would need to be arranged in an extraordinarily ordered stacked pattern, something never before observed in any other comet. If true, Atlas would not merely be a strange body, but a natural laboratory, allowing us to glimpse a rare, unknown form of interstellar matter. Yet the very regularity of the phenomenon stirred another layer of emotion: skepticism. Some researchers bluntly asked whether, if Atlas were a designed probe, these gas pulses might resemble a mechanical heartbeat, a hidden operational cycle disguised as nature. The idea sounded like science fiction, but many shivered when they saw the data repeat, resembling something programmed. What unsettled them further was that these bursts did not occur at random. They appeared to intensify as Atlas approached strategic waypoints: Mars, the Sun, Jupiter. No one dared call this intentional. Yet the correlation made the artificial trace hypothesis increasingly difficult to dismiss outright. As always, scientific caution reasserted itself as a safeguard. Experimentalists stressed that anomalies should not lead too quickly to extraterrestrial conclusions. They proposed alternative natural scenarios. Atlas's core might be stratified in unusual ways, or contain catalytic minerals that altered vapor pressure. Such explanations did not dispel every doubt, but they reminded everyone that science must move step by step, never letting imagination outrun the data. Beyond its outgassing cycles, another phenomenon startled observers: Atlas's rotational stability. Comets typically alter their spin as violent eruptions push them off balance. Atlas, however, maintained nearly constant rotation for months. Computer simulations suggested that for such steadiness, its mass must be distributed with extreme precision, like a finely crafted gyroscope. Again, two contrasting emotions emerged: astonishment, because this was a rare opportunity to test fundamental dynamics under interstellar conditions, and suspicion, because the perfection was unsettling, almost as if some internal mechanism were keeping Atlas from wobbling. Infrared readings added yet another puzzle. Atlas's surface temperature fluctuated irregularly. Instead of heating uniformly as it approached the Sun, certain regions remained stably cold, while others spiked well beyond predictions. These local disparities not only complicated sublimation models, but also hinted at strange insulating structures within perhaps hollow chambers or layers of different materials. For science, this was invaluable, offering a chance to study the physics of interstellar matter. But for the imagination, it was a loophole, a suggestion of artificial casing beneath the dust. What stood out, however, was that despite growing speculation, the scientific community remained sober. Researchers agreed that while Atlas was unusual, every hypothesis had to be tested against continuous data. This discipline prevented the subject from collapsing into myth, keeping it anchored as a matter of rigorous science. Still, no one denied that Atlas had become an extraordinary challenge, a small body with the power to shake what we thought we understood. And so, the more we observed, the more we analyzed, the dominant emotion burned brighter: scientific astonishment. Not the simple awe of beauty, but the unsettling wonder of realizing that the universe can still rattle the foundations we once considered unshakable. Atlas, through its pulsing, outgassing, and uncanny stability, had turned the solar system into a living laboratory where every measurement was a new question, every graph a crack in the sturdy wall of knowledge. And as that wall trembled, humanity shivered in fear yet thrilled, too, to witness the horizon of understanding push outward once more. If Atlas's pulsing outgassing cycles and uncanny rotational stability had already startled the scientific world, then the spectroscopic data, especially its polarization branch, pushed astonishment to its very peak. In astrophysics, light is the most faithful messenger. It carries secrets from the tiniest grains of dust to the vast emptiness of space, from chemical fingerprints to microstructures unseen. And when the light of Atlas was captured, it played like a strange symphony, each note falling outside the melody we thought we knew. Spectral results revealed absorption lines that did not match the templates of ordinary comets. Instead of the strong signatures of water, silicate dust, and organic carbon, the spectra stood out with clear traces of nickel, while iron, its natural twin, was nearly absent. To any researcher, this was a shock. Nickel and iron almost always appear together, born of the same conditions, fused by the same cosmic history. Their separation on Atlas forced a haunting question. Had its formation taken place in some radically different environment, or was there a selective mechanism at work, one we had never encountered? Some research groups suggested that Atlas's unique dust layer might mask iron, scattering or absorbing it in wavelengths beyond our reach. Yet skeptics were blunt. The disappearance of iron could itself be an edited trace, like the fingerprint left behind when humans refine minerals for technology, stripping away one element and leaving behind another in unnatural proportions. There was no direct proof, but the very possibility set imaginations ablaze, conjuring visions of Atlas as a fragment of engineered matter disguised beneath the rags of a comet. And still the astonishment grew. When telescopes examined the polarization branch, the way sunlight became polarized after scattering off Atlas's dust, the data once again broke from centuries of statistical norms. Ordinarily, as a comet's distance from the sun changes, its polarization curve shifts in a predictable way, a pattern recorded across countless observations. Atlas defied this. Its curve veered off into an entirely different branch, as though drawing its own distinct signature. Some scientists proposed that this anomaly could be explained if Atlas's dust grains possessed fractal structures complex, branching geometries that scatter light chaotically. If correct, Atlas would be a treasure trove, a rare window into the diversity of cosmic matter across the galaxy. But others argued that the divergence was too stark to be blamed on mere grain shape. They asked the unsettling question, what if Atlas's dust was not wholly natural at all, but arranged in some deliberate manner, like a designed surface meant to manipulate light itself? Here, three layers of emotion are intertwined. First, scientific astonishment. Each data point struck like a blow to the safe walls of knowledge, forcing researchers to widen their models and forge new hypotheses. Next came skepticism. The deviations were too sharp to ignore, and many could not help but entertain the spectre of artificiality. And finally, caution, because serious science could not lean on imagination alone, but required repeated observation, multi-channel analysis, and the discipline of verification. This caution was evident in the reports. Even when groups published shocking results, nearly all concluded with the familiar refrain, "Further observations are needed to confirm." Those cold words masked the quiet excitement underneath, for everyone knew they were brushing against a phenomenon that could rewrite the opening chapters of interstellar astronomy. Yet the disclaimer was necessary. Science could not afford haste, for a wrong conclusion would fracture the fragile trust on which it rests. Still, the truth was undeniable. Atlas's spectral and polarization anomalies made it the universe's odd child. Not just a source of data to refine our models, but a spark that ignited philosophical reflection. Perhaps the cosmos does not conform to the frameworks we have grown comfortable with, or worse or more wondrous perhaps. Atlas is the mirror reminding us that we are not the only force capable of reshaping matter. In its strange polarized light, humanity glimpsed a double-edged challenge, a golden opportunity to expand knowledge, and a pit of doubt that invited whispers of extraterrestrial design. And it was within this tension that Atlas maintained its grip not by speaking, but by staying silent in its difference, forcing us to continue down a path both scientific and existential. When all the data were placed side by side, the picture of Atlas did not become clearer. On the contrary, it resembled a tangled map, where every road led only to another fork. Unusual gases, strange spectra, abnormal light polarization, rhythmic outgassing, suspiciously steady rotation. Each anomaly could be explained in isolation, yet together they composed a discordant symphony, stirring curiosity while shaking trust. This is why the prevailing mood was no longer simple fascination, but scientific astonishment verging on shock. Atlas seemed born to challenge every theoretical boundary humanity had built. In international conferences at the close of 2024, scientists presented their findings with a familiar cadence. Data displayed, models tested, results that failed to align, followed by the same refrain: more observation required. Paper after paper ended with the same cold phrases: insufficient evidence, further confirmation needed. And yet that coldness only underscored the deeper truth. The world had witnessed a celestial body capable of rewriting the textbooks of astrophysics. Humility demanded restraint, but in their eyes, no one could hide the blaze of astonishment. Still, running beneath that astonishment was a quiet current of doubt. Many whispered, what if Atlas is not natural? The anomalies from nickel without iron to outgassing and precise pulses could be read as the fingerprints of an artificial structure veiled in dust. No one dared inscribe such speculation into official reports, but it crept into corridor conversations, into anonymous comments on scientific forums. Some compared Atlas to the early discovery of pulsars, first mistaken for signals of alien intelligence before being revealed as natural phenomena. Would Atlas follow the same trajectory, once again proving that the universe is strange enough to deceive us? Or this time, would suspicion refuse to fade, germinating instead into a darker truth? It was precisely this tension that made caution the compass of the age. Scientists knew a single reckless declaration could topple the credibility they had labored to build. Caution was not just about protecting reputation, it was about preventing the human mind from slipping into unchecked dreams. No matter how high the tide of emotion, researchers anchored themselves to numbers, graphs, and computer models. They reminded one another that science advances only through patience and verification. If Atlas carried within it a secret larger than any before, that secret could be revealed only through long chains of repeated observation, not by speculative leaps. Yet even amid such restraint, scientific astonishment flowed like an underground current that could not be stopped. For Atlas, in its silence and strangeness, had transformed every telescope into a strained, unblinking eye, every scientist into a dreamer tormented by data. It did not need to emit signals or unveil an obvious design. Through its very oddness, it forced humanity to reconsider the origins of matter in the galaxy, the models we once thought unshakable, and the possibility that forces exist far beyond our comprehension. By year's end, as Atlas swept past perihelion and drifted toward Jupiter, one simple but haunting realization settled in. Whether explained or not, Atlas had become the greatest natural experiment in modern astronomy. It was proof that the universe exists not merely to be observed, but to test the limits of human intellect. And within that test, we trembled with fear, burned with desire, and braced ourselves with caution. In one concluding paper, a scientist wrote, "Atlas may be nothing more than an unusual comet, but until definitive evidence arrives, it remains a mirror, reflecting humanity's astonishment, the astonishment of realizing that the universe still holds layers of meaning never before unveiled." That statement distilled the emotions of an entire era, a time when Atlas was not merely a celestial body, but a symbol of scientific wonder and a reminder that doubt and caution must always walk hand in hand with curiosity. As Atlas continued its cold drift across the solar system, leaving behind mountains of anomalous data, one haunting question refused to fade. What exactly is Atlas? No one was content anymore with the simple label of interstellar comet. Everything it displayed, the overwhelming release of CO2 over water, the heartbeat-like pulses of outgassing, the near-impossible stability of its rotation, the spectral signature of nickel without iron, the polarized light curves veering into uncharted territory, all of it defied the old definitions. In humanity's eyes, Atlas became less an object and more a riddle inscribed in a cryptic language, forcing us to admit that the cosmos holds more layers of meaning than we had ever imagined. The first hypothesis, considered the safer one, suggested that Atlas is simply an extreme natural product. Perhaps it formed in some distant star system, under conditions so severe that its structure and chemistry diverged completely from anything known within our solar system. In this scenario, Atlas is a kind of cryptobiotic state of cosmic matter, an entity lying dormant for millions of years, drifting through the frozen dark, only to reveal its strange behaviors when it wandered into a more energetic region of space. If this is true, Atlas is not a sign of technology, but a natural seed, a primordial archive carrying clues to the birth of planets and even life itself. That thought alone lit a quiet flame of hope, that within Atlas's gases and dust, we might discover the organic compounds, the primal building blocks, that show how life could germinate anywhere across the universe. And yet, the deeper we looked, the harder it became to dismiss the uncanny coincidences. Some thinkers argued that Atlas might not be random at all. Instead, it could be a form of programmable matter, material engineered to behave according to a script. The steady cycles of gas release, the perfect balance of its spin, these could be the fingerprints of design. In this view, Atlas is not merely a celestial wanderer, but a disguised spacecraft, shrouded in layers of ice and dust, moving silently from star system to star system. If so, then its arrival in our neighborhood is not happenstance but part of an intentional itinerary of observation. And with that realization, the shadow of the dark forest theory crept back. Perhaps we are no longer observers, but the observed. Thus, humanity found itself stretched taut between two poles of emotion. On one side lay awe laced with mystery, as though Atlas were an ancient manuscript, half scientific, half mystical, etched with symbols we lacked the wisdom to decipher. On the other side shimmered hope, that Atlas could be carrying a cosmic message, reminding us that life is not solitary, that Earth is not the only seed. Yet at the same time, a darker feeling pressed in, the fear that Atlas was not a gift, but an eye in the dark forest, watching us in silence, testing whether our young civilization could endure the scrutiny of the cosmos. In that moment, Atlas transcended its role as a celestial body. It became a living metaphor for humanity's existential condition, standing between the yearning for connection and the terror of predation, between the light of seeds sown and the shadow of hunters concealed. And perhaps that is the truest reason Atlas has unsettled us so deeply. It not only forces us to ask what Atlas is, it forces us to ask who we are. Will we choose to see Atlas as the seed of hope, or as the warning flare of a distant intelligence hiding within the dark forest? As debate spread, two opposing hypotheses began to dominate every forum. At one extreme, Atlas was envisioned as a seed of life. The fractal structures within its dust, the breathing-like cycles of gas release, even the uncanny balance of its rotation, all could be interpreted as natural strategies for preserving and transporting fundamental compounds. This hypothesis painted a bright picture. Atlas, as the courier of the cosmos, carrying cryptobiotic states, dormant seeds of life, waiting in silence for the right conditions to awaken. Should it one day fall onto a receptive world, life might germinate, like a drifting seed from a distant forest taking root in alien soil. Through this lens, Atlas was not merely an object, but the outstretched hand of a generous universe, planting in humanity a fragile hope, that we are not alone, that life is written into the laws of existence as an unwritten decree. On the opposite side, the dark forest hypothesis sent chills through countless minds. If Atlas were programmable matter, engineered to mimic the behavior of a comet, then every so-called natural sign could be nothing more than camouflage. A disguised spacecraft might be designed in precisely this way, releasing gas in cycles to mask propulsion, maintaining perfect balance to avoid detection, emitting anomalous spectral lines to test the reactions of a watching civilization. In that scenario, Atlas was not a seed but an eye in the dark forest, silently monitoring Earth's behavior. If we displayed too much curiosity, that itself could serve as evidence proof that we had revealed both our position and our nature. And in a universe where every civilization lives under fear, exposure could invite consequences beyond imagination. These two visions, one radiant with hope, the other steeped in dread, did not cancel each other out. They coexisted, like the two faces of a single mirror. That coexistence gave Atlas its aura of mystery, at once a treasure chest of knowledge and a warning flare of survival. Humanity, gazing upon it, saw not only a celestial body but a reflection of itself, both the longing to extend the frontiers of life and the trembling fear of becoming prey. The astonishment, tinged with mystery, lay in this simple truth. Neither hypothesis could be dismissed. Data supported both interpretations, and the ambiguity itself elevated Atlas into a living symbol of cosmic paradox. It became less a scientific puzzle than an existential test, where the answer was not contained in the data, but in how we chose to respond. If we chose to believe Atlas was a seed, we opened our hearts to the cosmos, ready for connection. If we chose to see it as an eye in the dark forest, we trained ourselves in silence, concealment, and vigilance. Each choice carried profound philosophical consequences for humanity's future. The world is split into two emotional currents. One half grew enchanted with discussions of organic compounds, of the possibility that Atlas carried the genetic code of the universe. They saw in it a gentle message, that life is scattered everywhere, not confined to Earth. The other half whispered of camouflage strategies, of the darker capacities of alien technology. They saw in Atlas a cold warning, that we may have revealed ourselves too soon. Between these two extremes, humanity as a whole entered a new emotional state, at once anxious, hopeful, and mystically awestruck, a mixture without precedent in the history of science. Atlas, in its silence and strangeness, had turned Earth into a global philosophical stage. It was not only an astronomy test, but for the human spirit itself. Would we choose to look at the universe with fearful eyes, or with hearts yearning for connection? That question remains unanswered, and perhaps that very uncertainty is the greatest gift Atlas has brought. As the scientific data piled higher, without offering definitive answers, the conversation about Atlas began to spill far beyond the walls of laboratories. Philosophers, writers, and ordinary people joined the current of speculation. Atlas was no longer merely a problem for physics or astronomy. It became an existential question. How should humanity view the cosmos, when in the night sky hung a silent, enigmatic presence that defied every definition? One camp argued that Atlas was a symbol of hope. They leaned on the possibility that it might be a seed of life, a natural or engineered archive sent forth to sow existence on new worlds. In their eyes, Atlas resembled a cosmic instruction manual, written not in words but in gases, dust, and light, guiding the universe's strategy for maintaining continuity across time and distance. This vision wrapped humanity in a rare warmth, the sense that we were not an accident, but part of a greater design in which life itself was tended, scattered, and extended over millions of light years. Here, the awe was tinged with mystery and a gentler hue, the astonishment of realizing that we might belong to a story far larger than we ever imagined. The opposing camp warned that such a vision was dangerously optimistic. They interpreted Atlas through the lens of the dark forest. In a universe where silence equals survival, any anomaly could be bait. To them, Atlas resembled a disguised spacecraft, meticulously crafted to mimic a comet, probing Earth's reactions. If we revealed too much, if our curiosity betrayed our presence, that might already serve as evidence proof that we had exposed ourselves. In this frame, Atlas was a dark mirror, reflecting a primal fear, the dread of being discovered in a forest where every creature is a potential predator. Here, awe and mystery took on a more chilling tone, the astonishment of realizing that the universe might be colder, more perilous than our worst nightmares. This divide set the global stage ablaze. Conferences echoed with scientists urging restraint, insisting that no hypothesis yet carried sufficient evidence. But beyond academia, the public imagination could not be restrained. People wrote poems about Atlas, composed music, produced documentaries, and crafted works of speculative fiction in which Atlas became the protagonist, sometimes the sower of life, sometimes the eye of a distant hunter. In the collective imagination, Atlas transcended its physical identity. It became a dual-faced emblem, where hope and fear stood together like two sides of a cosmic coin. These debates sparked a new emotional layer. Humanity began asking not only what was true, but what it wanted to believe. The question shifted from data to collective faith. Would we choose to see the universe as a vast home where life is continually seeded, or as a shadowed forest where silence is the only strategy? That question touched the very roots of philosophy. Our view of the cosmos was, ultimately, a view of ourselves. To believe Atlas was a seed was to affirm a creative and optimistic essence of existence. To believe Atlas was an eye in the dark forest was to embrace a harsher, more unforgiving reality. Both views carried fragments of truth, leaving us suspended on the knife edge between them. In the end, it was precisely this awe-laced mystery, this overwhelming encounter with a riddle beyond resolution, that held the world captive in Atlas's story. It was no longer a distant body of ice and dust, but a test of the spirit, a mirror for the philosophy of an entire species. Atlas did not speak, but in its silence, it resonated like a background score, forcing us to confront both our fears and our hopes within ourselves. As Atlas continued drifting outward, no one could state with certainty which hypothesis it belonged to. All humanity held were scattered fragments of data, spun into countless contradictory scenarios. Yet one truth could not be denied. Atlas had become an existential test. For perhaps the first time in modern history, humankind was forced to confront the question head-on: who do we wish to become in this universe? If Atlas is seen as a seed of life, humanity can draw inspiration from hope. We may believe that life is not alone, that the cosmos is filled with natural or engineered archives, carrying cryptobiotic states waiting for the moment to awaken. In this view, Atlas is a kind of programmable matter of nature, a material encoded to preserve organic compounds, to ferry them across millions of light years, scattering them onto any world capable of sustaining them. Such a belief, if nurtured, would guide humanity toward openness, to keep exploring, to reach outward, and to nurture life as part of a universal responsibility. But if Atlas is seen as a disguised spacecraft, then the anxiety of the dark forest is rekindled. In that frame, every natural feature is merely a mask. Its rhythmic gas jets may be nothing more than mechanical pulses. Its anomalous spectra could be deliberate signals, probing for response. Its skewed polarization curve could be a test. Can a young civilization decode this? And if so, how will it react? Here, Atlas ceases to be a seed and becomes instead a mobile report, quietly transmitting to some unseen recipient in the shadows. If this belief dominates, it steers humanity onto another path. Silence, concealment, cautious survival, like a fragile creature tiptoeing through a forest where predators lurk unseen. What is both terrifying and wondrous is that both visions remain plausible. Atlas could be a germ, or it could be an eye, gift or trap, and it is this awe infused with mystery that yields its greatest value. Atlas forces us to recognize that the universe is not only a repository of scientific truths, but also a philosophical mirror, reflecting the entirety of the human psyche. How we choose to see Atlas is how we see ourselves, through hope or through fear, through openness or through caution, through creativity or through suspicion. The debates show no sign of resolution. Yet amid the noise, a new awareness has begun to surface. Atlas is not merely an object to be decoded, but a test of maturity. Are we ready to face the possibility that there are other intelligences out there? Do we possess the courage to open ourselves to hope and the wisdom to hold on to caution at the same time? The answer does not lie in Atlas, it lies in the choices humanity makes. And perhaps this is the true gift Atlas has left behind. Not whether it is a comet, a seed, or a probe, but the way it compelled an entire civilization to lift its gaze, to tremble, to hope, to reflect. Awe and mystery are not merely emotions born from observing the universe. They are marks of maturity when we accept that some questions are not meant to be solved immediately. In its silence, Atlas whispered a profound lesson. Maturity does not come from having all the answers, but from daring to live alongside the mystery. After months of heated debate while the public drowned itself in mystical speculations about Atlas, from seed of life to the eye in the dark forest, the scientific community was compelled to return to its core responsibility, to keep the conversation anchored in reason. Without that anchor, wonder too easily drifts into delusion, and hope collapses into misinterpretation. At this stage, the dominant emotions were not awe or fear, but skepticism and rationality, not as a way of denying the extraordinary, but as a safeguard against letting collective imagination sweep human intellect off its foundations. The first reminder researchers emphasized was the concept of false positives, the false alarms that haunt observational science. The history of astronomy is littered with episodes where humanity thought it had stumbled upon the extraordinary, only to later discover it was nothing more than an artifact of data. A strange spectral line might turn out to be an instrument glitch. A seemingly regular cycle might collapse into statistical coincidence, once extended over longer intervals. A sudden flash of light might prove to be a fleeting atmospheric reflection. To prematurely assign extraterrestrial meaning to these anomalies is to build castles on sand, and castles on sand are destined to fall. The second point of caution was statistical selection bias. In any vast ocean of data, the human eye is naturally drawn to the irregular, the dramatic, the outlier, while ignoring the overwhelming majority that conforms to established patterns. If thousands of comets behave according to our models and only Atlas diverges, the instinctive conclusion is, it must be special. But rarity does not automatically mean artificiality. Any sufficiently large dataset will contain exceptions. This is precisely why scientific skepticism warns against elevating the outlier into proof of the extraordinary. Atlas may be unusual, but unusual does not mean alien. The third and most fundamental principle was the demand for reproducible observations. Science only accepts claims that can be confirmed again and again, across independent instruments, independent teams, and independent conditions. A single dataset, no matter how striking, is never enough to overturn a theoretical framework. The findings around Atlas so far are based on limited observational windows, valuable, yes, but not decisive. Only when those measurements are repeated at multiple stages of its trajectory, under diverse observational methods, can we begin to draw firm conclusions. This is not conservatism for its own sake, but a reflection of respect for science itself, respect for method, for verification, for objectivity, even when the truth may prove less spectacular than imagination. Within this framework, caution emerged as the guiding principle. Scientists knew the public was hungry for a grand narrative, an awe-inspiring explanation, but they also knew their duty was not storytelling but truth-seeking. Caution did not mean retreat. It meant acknowledging that some questions cannot be rushed. They demand time, data, and patience. Only through such caution can science avoid morphing into a new form of mythology, another religion of illusions. Atlas, with its silence and anomalies, posed a double-edged challenge. On one side, it stoked collective imagination, tempting people to dream of seeds of life or tremble before the eye of the dark forest. On the other hand, it provided an opportunity for science to demonstrate its worth, to keep humanity from sliding off the path of reason, to prevent us from being seduced by false positives or misled by statistical biases. And perhaps here lies the deepest lesson Atlas offers, not about alien technology or cosmic seeds, but about ourselves. The most dangerous adversary may not lurk in the void between the stars, but in our own capacity for self-deception. Rational skepticism is not cynicism. When we look back at the history of science, we find countless moments when humanity believed it had stumbled upon something extraordinary, only to discover later that it was merely a false positive, a deceptive signal masquerading as revelation. One of the most famous examples is the "wow" signal recorded in 1977, when astronomer Jerry Eman spotted an anomalous burst of radio waves coming from the constellation Sagittarius. He circled it in red ink on the printout and scribbled a single word beside it: "Wow." Instantly, the global press erupted, proclaiming that this might be the first evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Yet decades passed, and the signal never repeated. Other explanations, ranging from classified military satellites to natural radio interference, slowly replaced the original excitement. Today, the "wow" signal remains an unresolved curiosity, but also a cautionary tale that the thrill of discovery is not the same as truth. Another case, even closer to Atlas in its implications, was the discovery of pulsars in 1967, when Jocelyn Bell Burnell first detected the regular pulses of radio emissions from a distant source. The signals were astonishingly precise, almost mechanical. They seemed far too regular to be natural. In fact, the research team informally labeled the first source LGM for little green men, but science, through persistence and replication, revealed the reality. Pulsars are rapidly rotating neutron stars, remnants of collapsed suns. What initially looked like alien beacons turned out to be one of the most remarkable natural phenomena in astrophysics. Today, pulsars serve as exquisite cosmic clocks, tools for mapping spacetime itself. This story illustrates the danger of statistical selection bias. In the chaos of noisy data, we fixate on what is rare or unusual, then leap to extraordinary conclusions. But unusual is not synonymous with artificial. Even in particle physics, far from the stars, false positives have shaken entire communities. In 2011, a team announced they had measured neutrinos traveling faster than the speed of light, a claim that, if true, would have shattered Einstein's theory of relativity. The world buzzed, headlines screamed, and many wondered if physics was about to be rewritten. Yet only months later, the truth emerged. The anomaly was due to a faulty fiber optic cable connection in the equipment. The supposed revolution evaporated. This episode, though unrelated to astronomy, remains a powerful reminder of the importance of reproducible observations. Only when other groups failed to replicate the results did skepticism prevail, allowing the real explanation to surface. Placed against this backdrop, the case of Atlas becomes clearer. Its appeal lies in the emotional intensity it provokes: astonishment, anxiety, and hope intertwined. But those very emotions are also the greatest danger. If we allow ourselves to repeat the mistakes of the "wow" signal, or the premature whispers of little green men, or the faster-than-light neutrinos, then collective belief could again collapse under the weight of a single measurement error or statistical fluke. And the fallout would be more than disappointment. It would be the erosion of public trust in science itself. This is why scientists consistently stress the necessity of skepticism and rationality. Skepticism is not cynicism. It does not deny the existence of the extraordinary. Instead, it acts as the safeguard, ensuring that humanity does not mistake illusion for insight. Rationality does not strip away wonder. It channels wonder through the discipline of verification. Together, they protect us from our own eagerness to believe. At the heart of this discipline lies a profound respect for science itself. Science is not a machine for producing sensational stories. It is a method, a process of relentless testing and checking, where every claim must pass the gauntlet of reproducible observations. No matter how thrilling or poetic a hypothesis may sound, it must survive repetition by independent teams, using independent instruments, across independent contexts. Only then does it ascend from speculation to truth. This respect for the process, for its rigor and patience, is the true tribute to the power of human inquiry. Within this framework, caution becomes an essential virtue. Caution does not mean avoiding the new or suppressing bold ideas. Rather, it means shielding humanity from premature certainty. It keeps science from collapsing into spectacle and ensures that every advance, however small, rests on solid ground. In the case of Atlas, history's lessons echo loudly. We cannot afford to rush to conclusions. If we wish to uncover its true nature, we must embrace the slow discipline of time, data, and replication. For the truth, whether magnificent or mundane, only reveals itself to those who are patient. As the media storm surrounding Atlas continued to swell, the scientific community understood that their responsibility was not only to collect data, but also to defend objectivity itself. At this moment, the familiar yet indispensable mechanisms of modern science came into play: peer review, multi-tiered observation, and controlled publication. These were not bureaucratic rituals, but the ramparts of rationality, shielding inquiry from speculation and emotional overreach. The first line of defense was peer review. Research groups studying Atlas, even when holding data that seemed groundbreaking, were required to submit their findings to reputable journals, where independent experts dissected every number, every assumption, every method. Through this process, small but crucial flaws could be uncovered: an algorithm insufficiently calibrated, an unchecked initial premise, or a subtle error in signal processing. Though sometimes frustrating for researchers eager to publish, peer review stands as the clearest expression of respect for science. It elevates transparency and cross-examination over the temptation to rush after extraordinary results. Simultaneously, observations of Atlas were layered across independent platforms. Optical telescopes, infrared arrays, radar systems, and even spacecraft instruments were enlisted to ensure that no single tool dictated the narrative. If a signal appeared on only one device, it was likely interference. But if it repeated across multiple platforms, across different wavelengths, then confidence increased. This is the value of multi-tiered observation. It prevents blind trust in any single source, replacing it with cross-verification. In Atlas's case, some findings have already been confirmed across systems, while others remain inconclusive. The distinction itself is evidence of caution at work. Intriguing data may be acknowledged, but it is not treated as proof until it can withstand independent replication. Another safeguard rarely visible to the public is controlled publication. In cases of highly controversial phenomena, scientific councils often delay official announcements until at least part of the dataset has been independently verified. This policy is not meant to hide the truth, but to shield the public from premature shocks. History has shown that a false claim, even if retracted within weeks, can damage social trust for decades. With Atlas, such restraint became even more critical, as ungrounded extraterrestrial speculations were already exploding across social media. By holding back until the evidence matured, science demonstrated its commitment to skepticism and rationality, despite public pressure for dramatic answers. At a deeper level, these mechanisms function as the immune system of science. In a world saturated with emotion and assumption, science survives because it can say the most difficult but necessary words: "We don't know yet." That admission is not weakness, it is the highest form of respect for science. It reflects the courage to accept uncertainty, rather than manufacturing premature answers to satisfy demand. In this light, caution ceases to be a passive hesitation and becomes an active virtue, the protection of truth against haste. Atlas, in this context, became a stress test for the entire system. It revealed why peer review is indispensable, why multi-tiered observations are crucial, and why controlled publication is a survival tool for science itself. It reminded the world that amid a sea of emotions from awe to fear, only skepticism and rationality can keep the ship of knowledge on course. And it is precisely because of this steadiness that science can gradually unravel mysteries without sacrificing its credibility. When all the data, hypotheses, and debates had been laid bare, Atlas continued its silent journey, not explaining its strangeness. In that void, the public easily fell into the whirlpool of imagination, dreaming of a seed of life sown with hope, or fearing a cold, watchful eye hidden in the dark forest. Yet it was precisely at this point that the scientific community reaffirmed its core mission: to serve as a lighthouse of reason, guiding humanity through the fog of emotion. That lighthouse rests on three pillars: The first is systematic skepticism. No hypothesis, no matter how compelling, can be accepted without repeatable evidence. Skepticism is not meant to deny, but to ensure that every step forward rests on firm ground. The second pillar is respect for science, the conviction that trust belongs not in results, but in method. Tools such as peer review, reproducible observations, and vigilance against statistical selection bias are not mere techniques. They are expressions of reverence for objective truth. And the third pillar is caution in disclosure, protecting humanity from the traps of false positives and premature claims. Through this light, Atlas becomes a living lesson. The cosmos may overwhelm us, but it does not always send clear messages. The silence of Atlas may signal a rare natural structure, or it may simply be noise magnified by human imagination. But the deeper question is how we respond to that silence. Do we keep our composure and wait for more data, or do we rush to turn it into a symbol of unverified belief? Here, skepticism and reason become anchors. They allow us to experience wonder without losing sight of truth. They remind us that science does not race to give the fastest answer, but to give the correct one. And for that reason, Atlas, no matter how enigmatic, cannot shake this foundation. On the contrary, it sharpens the lesson. The only way humanity avoids deceiving itself is by continuing to walk in the light of reason. This stance, far from diminishing Atlas's allure, makes it even more valuable. In every measurement, every graph, we see not only a distant celestial body, but also the maturation of science itself. The beauty of Atlas lies not only in its mystery, but also in the way it compels us to focus on data, on method, on truth. In that moment, respect for science becomes vivid. We revere it not because it gives us a spectacular story, but because it protects us from dangerous illusions. Ultimately, the greatest lesson from Atlas may not lie in its actual nature, but in the path we have walked to seek an answer. Along that path, we have learned to practice caution, to accept uncertainty, and to heed the call of reason, even when emotion urges us toward dramatic visions. Atlas, in its silence, has become a mirror for science itself, a reminder that true strength lies not in having all the answers, but in asking the right questions and in the patience to wait. When all the data, hypotheses, and debates had been laid out, Atlas kept moving silently, not explaining its peculiarities. In that silence, the public easily slipped into whirlpools of imagination, dreaming of a seed of life carrying hope, or fearing a cold and watchful eye in the dark forest. Yet it was precisely in this moment that the scientific community reiterated its central mission, to serve as a lighthouse of reason, shining a steady beam through the fog of human emotion. That lighthouse rests on three pillars. The first is systematic skepticism. No hypothesis, no matter how seductive, can be accepted without evidence that can be repeated. Skepticism is not denial. It is a safeguard, ensuring every advance stands on solid ground. The second pillar is respect for science, the conviction that we place trust not in results but in method. Peer review, reproducible observations, and scrutiny of statistical selection bias are more than technicalities. They are acts of reverence for objective truth. The third pillar is caution in disclosure, a shield that protects humanity from the traps of false positives and premature declarations. Through this lens, Atlas becomes a living lesson. The cosmos can overwhelm us, but it rarely offers unambiguous answers. The silence of Atlas may point to an unusual natural structure, or it may be nothing more than noise magnified by imagination. What matters more is how we face that silence. Do we keep our composure and wait for more data? Or do we rush to turn it into a symbol of untested belief? Here, skepticism and reason become our anchor. They allow us to savor wonder without losing truth. They teach us that science does not strive to provide the quickest response, but the most reliable one. And for that reason, Atlas, no matter how enigmatic, cannot weaken the foundation. Instead, it clarifies the lesson. The only way humanity avoids deceiving itself is by continuing to walk in the light of reason. Paradoxically, this posture makes Atlas even more compelling. In every measurement, every curve, we see not only a distant celestial object but also the steady maturation of science itself. The beauty of Atlas lies not just in the mystery, but in the way it compels us to focus on data, on method, on truth. At such moments, respect for science becomes tangible. We honor it, not because it delivers dramatic tales, but because it guards us against dangerous illusions. In the end, the greatest lesson from Atlas may not lie in its ultimate nature, but in the journey humanity has taken in pursuit of an answer. Along that path, we have learned the discipline of caution, the acceptance of uncertainty, and the courage to listen to reason, even when emotion urges us towards spectacle. In its silence, Atlas has become a mirror held up to science, a reminder that true strength does not lie in having all the answers, but in knowing how to ask the right questions and in the patience to wait for them. Another hypothesis that stirs both hope and profound awe is the idea of cosmic recycling. According to this view, Atlas may not be merely an unusual comet, but rather a fragmentary witness to a far greater cycle of the galaxy. In the cosmos, nothing is ever truly lost. Everything is recycled, transformed, and reborn in vast cycles of time. The elements in our bodies were once forged in the heart of a dying star. The water on Earth once evaporated from primordial celestial bodies. And Atlas, through its peculiar behavior, may be showing us this recycling process in its most vivid form. Data on Atlas's composition, the overwhelming levels of CO2, the anomalous nickel, the striking absence of iron, suggest that it may have formed from the remnants of a stellar system that already passed through a supernova. In the violent death of a star, matter is hurled outward, drifting through space, eventually condensing into fragments. Atlas could be one such shard, a recycled grain of the universe, carrying within it the legacy of a star long extinguished, now serving as raw material for future worlds. This thought inspires deep contemplation. Life never begins from nothing, but always rises upon the foundations of deaths that came before. Through this lens, Atlas is no longer a threatening stranger but a witness to cosmic rebirth. Each dust grain, each molecule escaping from its surface, is like an old brick being reused to construct a new house. The universe, rather than a cold void, becomes a vast recycling workshop where everything is preserved and transformed. Scientific excitement intensifies as researchers begin to consider that Atlas may be a kind of intermediary nucleus in the supply chain of cosmic matter, from the death of a star to the birth of a new planet. This image evokes the idea of a grand cycle. Stellar nurseries, where young stars are born, are also fed by remnants like Atlas, providing essential material. In this way, Atlas not only carries the story of the past, but may also serve as a seed for the future. It stands as evidence that life, or at least the matter necessary for life, is always preserved, transported, and repurposed across the universe. For humanity, this idea plants a powerful hope that life is not as fragile as we once feared, bound only to a single planet. On the contrary, life may be the inevitable outcome of a cosmos that constantly recycles itself, and Atlas, by its mere presence, becomes a symbol of that possibility. Within this realization, awe swells. We begin to see ourselves not merely as residents of Earth, but as products of an unbroken cosmic cycle of rebirth. Our bodies contain carbon once forged in dead stars. Our blood carries iron that burned in ancient stellar cores. And now Atlas, a drifting shard, arrives to remind us of that link. It resembles an ancient journal, not written in words, but in chemical signatures and orbital patterns, telling the story of life, death, and renewal on a galactic scale. In this vision, Atlas is no longer a haunting question about threat, but a silent answer to a larger mystery. How does the universe preserve its abundance? The answer is cosmic recycling. And with Atlas, humanity has a rare chance to witness this process up close, to see that the universe, in its own way, continually keeps the flame of life burning across billions of years and billions of worlds. If the hypothesis of cosmic recycling presents Atlas as a fragment born from cosmic death, then the idea of stellar nurseries, those cradles where young stars and planets are born, offers a very different shade. The hope and awe that Atlas might be a messenger from the very birthplaces of life in the galaxy. In radio and infrared telescopes, these colossal clouds of dust appear as glowing veils, where hundreds, even thousands, of young stars ignite into being. From them, planets, moons, and asteroids slowly take shape. The hypothesis suggests that Atlas may have once originated from such a nursery, before drifting into the void, carrying with it the legacy of its birthplace. This possibility ignites an intense scientific fascination. If Atlas truly is a migratory fragment from a stellar nursery, then analyzing its composition would be the equivalent of reading a chemical record straight from the cradle of the cosmos. Stellar nurseries are the forges where essential elements are synthesized: carbon, oxygen, and even the first complex organic molecules. Some comets within our own solar system have already astonished scientists with traces of organic matter, but ATLAS could carry an even more pristine and comprehensive archive, like a cosmic sample taken directly from a nursery still bearing its primordial fingerprints. The sense of awe only deepens when one considers that ATLAS may not be a passive rock at all, but a messenger, carrying seed packages, bundles of raw ingredients that the universe uses to sow life. Imagine, within its frozen core, complex organic compounds lying dormant, waiting to be released when they encounter the right environment. If this hypothesis proves true, then ATLAS would not only testify to the existence of stellar nurseries, but also act as a potential courier of life across interstellar space. Yet beyond the science, this hypothesis inspires a deeper layer of contemplation. It paints the cosmos not only as a cycle of death and recycling, but as a realm rich with nurture and care. Stellar nurseries are not just forges of plasma giants. They may also give birth to seeds of life like ATLAS, scattering them through the galaxy as if sowing fields in an infinite cosmic garden. In this vision, ATLAS ceases to be a stranger. It becomes a wandering seed, pausing briefly in our solar system to remind humanity that we are not alone in this grand process. For the public, this hypothesis brings hope. If the universe truly has a mechanism for seeding from stellar nurseries, then the existence of life elsewhere is no longer a far-fetched dream. Earth, in this light, is simply one of countless planets that may have received this gift. And ATLAS, with its enigmatic orbit, resembles a postcard sent from a distant past, carrying the message, life is not an exception, but part of a grand cosmic strategy. Such imagery leaves many people silent in reflection. If ATLAS is indeed a seed from a stellar nursery, then human existence is not merely the random outcome of collisions and evolution, but a chapter within the universe's far greater story. We are not just observers of the sky, we are products of those same nurseries, distant kin to ATLAS itself. And in that realization, the boundary between science and philosophy seems to dissolve, leaving only one overwhelming sensation: awe, vast and uncontainable. If the hypothesis of stellar nurseries inspires visions of the origins of life, another perspective opens a very different form of hope and awe. ATLAS as a laboratory in motion, a cosmic experiment unintentionally delivered into humanity's hands. Instead of observing distant phenomena across the galaxy, we suddenly find ourselves with a living sample passing through our solar system, a rare chance to test, verify, and refine fundamental ideas in physics and astronomy. In this view, scientific excitement rises sharply. Researchers see ATLAS not merely as an anomaly, but as a miniature replica of grand cosmic processes. Its unusual gas emissions, rather than being malfunctions, become opportunities to study sublimation physics, the transformation of solid matter directly into gas under conditions of vacuum and starlight. Its spectral irregularities, once unsettling, turn into test cases for polarization, branch theories, the subtle ways light is polarized when scattered by dust. Each irregularity, through this lens, is no longer a fearful question mark, but a natural experiment already set up by the cosmos. What inspires awe is the realization that ATLAS provides data no earthbound laboratory could ever recreate. We cannot reproduce the vacuum of interstellar space for long durations, nor can we fully simulate the combination of extreme temperatures, pressures, and radiation that a wandering comet experiences. Yet ATLAS, on its solitary journey, is moving through precisely that environment. Observing it is like opening a moving window into conditions otherwise accessible only through equations and speculation. A contemplative feeling emerges here. ATLAS reminds us of our limits. Despite particle accelerators of colossal scale and space telescopes of staggering sensitivity, sometimes the universe itself is the greatest scientist. It conducts colossal experiments on its own terms, then leaves fragments like ATLAS for us to examine. In this sense, ATLAS becomes a lesson in humility. Humanity is not the central author of knowledge, but a student lucky enough to stumble upon the cosmic experiments already underway. From this perspective, a new wave of hope takes root. If we can treat ATLAS as a laboratory in motion, it may yield breakthroughs, improving our models of planetary formation, deepening our understanding of how organic molecules endure in harsh conditions, and perhaps even uncovering principles of physics we have yet to imagine. This would be the true gift, not an immediate answer, but the infinite opportunity to learn. Ultimately, ATLAS, as a moving laboratory, reframes the universe itself. It is not only an endless void, but a vibrant classroom. Every celestial body, every shard of debris, every exploding star carries lessons, if only we are patient and rational enough to listen. Within that thought, hope and awe blend, leaving humanity with a conviction. We are still students in an ever-expanding school, and Atlas is just one of countless textbooks already written by the cosmos, awaiting the day we are ready to read them. Although the hypotheses surrounding Atlas still lack a definitive answer, one truth has gradually become clear. It has transcended the role of a mere celestial object to become a dual symbol of science and philosophy. For the scientific community, Atlas is a grand experiment authored by the cosmos, a living textbook that allows us to refine models, challenge hypotheses, and expand understanding. For the public, however, Atlas serves as a philosophical mirror, a reminder that human existence is inseparably tied to unanswered questions, and that within uncertainty itself, hope is born. On the scientific level, Atlas has become a wellspring of inspiration for new research. Theories about ready-made planetary cores, cosmic recycling, and stellar nurseries are not just elegant visions. They fuel the drive to create the next generation of observational technology. Larger telescopes and more powerful probes are being designed not only to monitor Atlas, but to search for its twin siblings scattered across the galaxy. Here, the emotion of scientific excitement is no fleeting thrill, but has evolved into a long-term plan. Humanity intends to use the gift of Atlas as a springboard for its next leap forward in exploration. On the philosophical level, Atlas provokes a different form of reflection. Its silence forces humanity to confront the question, how do we wish to perceive the universe? If we choose to see Atlas as a symbol of hope, we affirm belief in a cosmos of creativity, renewal, and the nurturing of life. If we view it with anxiety, we accept the universe as infinite, cold, and uncertain. Yet precisely at this crossroads lies the value of Atlas. It does not dictate an answer, but compels us to choose. And in making that choice, humanity matures one step further. What astonishes most is the way Atlas inadvertently binds science to philosophy, data to emotion, formula to faith. It reminds us that science is not a dry procedure, but a journey inseparable from human feelings, curiosity, doubt, awe, and ultimately hope. In its silence, Atlas has caused millions to lift their gaze skyward, not merely to seek data, but to rediscover themselves. Perhaps this is Atlas's greatest legacy. It has become a bridge between the present and future. In the present, it pushes science forward. In the future, it will live on as a symbol of humanity's desire to explore. Just as the stars once guided our ancestors across vast oceans, Atlas may serve as a cosmic lighthouse for our journey beyond the solar system. The hope and awe it evokes are not passing emotions, but enduring energy, urging us to go farther, higher, and deeper into the vast expanse of the cosmos. In the end, looking back, we realize Atlas has delivered the most precious gift. Not answers, but questions. Not certainty, but the power to dream. And in those questions, humanity has found the strength to continue. In this way, Atlas is not merely a comet passing through the sky in 2025, but an eternal symbol of inquiry, hope, and wonder, a reminder that the universe never runs out of marvels, and that our journey has only just begun. Since the dawn of time, when humanity still sought shelter in caves, the night sky has been a mirror, reflecting the greatest mysteries. Our ancestors, lacking telescopes or mathematical formulas, armed only with their naked eyes and imagination, looked upward and saw the universe as an open book. The fixed stars became gods, the wandering planets became messengers, and meteors streaking across the sky were read as omens. They carved constellations on rock walls, erected stone calendars to measure time, and spun myths to explain what they could not grasp. Out of this innocence stretched a thread that reaches to the present day, the longing to decipher the language of the cosmos. Time moved on, and a turning point arrived when Galileo lifted the first telescope toward the heavens. What he saw left the world astonished. The moon was not a flawless sphere but pocked with craters. Jupiter possessed 4 moons that circled it faithfully. Venus displayed phases like those of the moon. Awe and contemplation erupted simultaneously. The cosmos was no longer as theology had described, but was alive, volatile, and more complex than humankind had dared to imagine. That discovery was not merely a scientific event, but a spiritual one. It forced humanity to ask, if the heavens were imperfect, were we truly at the center? When Copernicus introduced heliocentrism, when Kepler uncovered elliptical orbits, and when Newton published the law of gravitation, humanity was, step by step, rewriting the constitution of the cosmos. Each discovery was a fragment, replacing ancient myth with mathematical clarity. Yet the more we explained, the more awe grew. For every veil lifted revealed another, larger one behind it. Rather than shrinking into comprehension, the universe expanded into infinity. The 20th century brought another cascade of wonder when the Hubble Space Telescope was launched into orbit. For the first time, we beheld distant galaxies, radiant nebulae, and vast celestial tapestries of unprecedented grandeur. Scientists and the public alike responded in unison, speechless amazement. Hubble's images were not only scientific data, but also art crafted by the cosmos itself. They satisfied the intellect while stirring the heart. And now, with the arrival of Atlas, this lineage continues. Just as Galileo shattered the illusion of a flawless moon, Atlas challenges every familiar model of comets. Just as Newton codified the laws of motion, Atlas demands that we revisit our definitions of celestial formation. It is an echo of history, reminding us that the journey of discovery has never ended. Atlas has become a new milestone, standing alongside the first telescope, the WOW signal of 1977, and Hubble sharing with them one essential trait, the power to astonish and to compel us to ask anew. On a deeper level, a thrill of excitement is kindled. Unlike merely reading about past epochs, we are living within one. Atlas is not simply a frozen traveler of ice and dust, it is a new page in the book of knowledge. The measurements we take today will themselves become tomorrow's history. Future generations may one day look back and say, this was the era when humanity confronted Atlas and learned another chapter of the universe. And in that thought, each of us, whether scientist, stargazer, or curious onlooker, becomes a witness to a historical moment, where contemplation and awe intertwine with excitement and the unyielding drive to explore. In the history of modern science, there have been moments when humanity looked up, held its breath, and believed it had brushed against the ultimate secret of the cosmos. In 1967, when Jocelyn Bell detected radio pulses so precise they seemed impossible to be natural, the scientific community was electrified. The rhythmic signals, accurate to the millisecond, led many to wonder if they were messages from an alien civilization. In internal reports, scientists even labeled them LGM, little green men, but soon the truth emerged. These were pulsars, rapidly rotating neutron stars, beaming electromagnetic pulses like cosmic clocks. The revelation was bittersweet, disappointing. It was not a sign of intelligence, yet monumental, because it unveiled a new class of stars and opened an entire branch of astrophysics. That moment left behind a lasting lesson. The universe humbles us, even as it inspires awe. A decade later, humanity was stunned once more by the WOW signal. A powerful burst of radio waves appeared suddenly, circled in red ink with a single word scribbled beside it. Wow! That image entered history as one of astronomy's most tantalizing enigmas. For decades, debate raged: was it natural, equipment noise, or a distant greeting from intelligence unknown? But the signal never repeated. It slipped into the past, leaving behind only a haunting silence. To this day, the WOW signal stands as a reminder that the universe can surprise us with a question, but never promise an answer. It is the symbol of contemplative helplessness, the awareness that we may have touched something extraordinary, yet could not hold on to it. Then came 1990, when the Hubble Space Telescope was launched into orbit. Its first images, blurred by a mirror flaw, stirred mixed emotions. Yet after repair, Hubble began sending back photographs that silenced the world in reverence. Distant galaxies blooming like flowers, nebulae glowing like paintings, vistas so profound they forced us to confront our smallness, a speck of dust adrift in an ocean of light. If pulsars and WOW embodied mystery and curiosity, Hubble embodied beauty, proof that with technology, humanity could capture the art of the cosmos. It was one of those milestones that forever transformed the way we see the sky. And now, Atlas enters this current as a new chapter in the chronicle of cosmic discovery. In many ways, it carries the essence of all those milestones. Like the pulsar, it challenges our very definitions of natural celestial bodies. Like the WOW signal, it remains an unanswered riddle, seeding us with questions that gnaw at the mind. Like Hubble, it awakens reverence, forcing humanity to look towards something larger, deeper, and impossible to grasp in a single glance. Atlas does not stand alone. It is part of this long lineage of moments that have defined our tradition, the tradition of awe and contemplation before the sky. What makes Atlas even more distinctive is that it is not just cold data, it has become a living emblem of continuity. To look at it is not merely to see a drifting mass of ice and dust, but to see the shadow of Galileo peering through his first telescope, to see Jocelyn Bell beside her radio dish, to see the red scrawl of "Wow" on a printout. Atlas is like a symphony, where echoes of the past blend with the call of the present, and that recognition stirs an excitement of its own. We are not simply studying history, we are living it, writing it with our own curiosity and our own relentless desire to know. In the history of knowledge, there are rare moments when the entire world seems to shift on its axis, no longer able to see the universe with the same eyes. Copernicus brought about one such moment when he declared that Earth was not the center, but merely one planet orbiting the Sunday. This was not simply an astronomical theory, it was a blow to the pride of humanity. From center, we were cast into the periphery, and in that displacement we were forced to contemplate our true place within the cosmic order. The feeling was sharp and unsettling, yet also flooded with reverence. How small we truly are in the face of such grandeur. In the 17th century, Newton inscribed the law of universal gravitation. For the first time, a single formula could explain everything from the fall of an apple to the orbit of the planets. That unity astonished the human mind, as though the entire cosmos had suddenly begun speaking a shared mathematical language. Knowledge was no longer fragmented, but unified under a single principle. The contemplation here was not merely admiration for genius, but shock at the power of human reason itself. We could read the very letters the universe had carved into space. Then came the early 20th century, when Einstein proposed the theory of relativity. Space and time, long regarded as a fixed backdrop, were revealed to be a pliable fabric, capable of bending under mass and energy. The idea overturned every intuitive belief. The universe was no longer static and absolute, but dynamic, flowing, and filled with surprise. This upheaval reshaped not only science but philosophy itself. Awe in that era no longer pointed solely toward the heavens, it pointed inward, to the human mind, daring enough to break the mold and uncover a new reality. Within this long chain of intellectual revolutions, Atlas now appears as a potential challenge poised to spark the next great turn. It does not arrive through an elegant equation, but through an anomaly, a comet that refuses to obey familiar rules, a body both like and unlike anything ever observed. Atlas forces us to ask again, are the models of celestial formation and evolution, built carefully over centuries, still sufficient? Or have we overlooked a cosmic mechanism, a hidden key, capable of explaining not just Atlas, but the very distribution of planets and comets across the galaxy? Here, contemplation and awe swell to their fullest. For Atlas may not be just a mass of ice and dust, but a messenger, announcing that we are standing at the threshold of another intellectual revolution. If Copernicus displaced us from the center, if Newton gave us the language of mathematics, if Einstein bent space and time, then Atlas may compel us to recognize another layer of law, the law of how the cosmos seeds and recycles life, planets, and matter. This would not only be a scientific advance, but also a spiritual one, the humility of realizing that even today's vast knowledge remains only a fragment of the colossal map of reality. And it is within this line of comparison that excitement surges, for if we are indeed standing before another Einstein, another Copernicus, then we living in this very age are witnesses to a turning point. Atlas, in this sense, is not merely a comet, but an invitation to join a revolution in knowledge that has not yet taken shape. And in that realization, it is difficult not to tremble in reverence, for we know that, once again, humanity will have to relearn how to see the sky, and in doing so, relearn how to see itself. When we look back across the entire journey of skywatching, we can see a single red thread stretching across millennia. From the rough carvings of prehistoric peoples, to Galileo's telescope, to Newton's prism and equations, to Einstein's relativity, to the photographs returned by Hubble, each generation has etched its own milestone into humanity's common book of knowledge. And now Atlas appears not merely as a strange celestial body, but as a mirror of history, reflecting all that we have already traversed while hinting at what we are yet to encounter. In the mirror of Atlas, we glimpse the past. Copernicus bent over his manuscript, Galileo raising his glass tube to the heavens, Jocelyn Bell patiently tracing radiostatic line by line. All these faces seem to fold into Atlas's silent orbit, reminding us that knowledge is always built upon persistence and unrelenting curiosity. In the mirror of Atlas, we also see the present: scientists in heated debate, supercomputers running simulations, telescopes pivoting toward that enigmatic point of light. Millions of eyes across the globe turn upward in unison, all asking the same question. And in the mirror of Atlas, we see the future: children gazing at screens today, who may tomorrow become scientists, engineers, philosophers, those who will write the next chapters of this odyssey. It is precisely this convergence that evokes a profound sense of contemplation and awe. Atlas offers not just data, but awareness. The awareness that we exist within a current far greater than the brief span of any individual life. We are one link in the unbroken chain of thousands of years of human effort to read the language of the cosmos. And through its mysterious presence, Atlas compels us to ask, what legacy will we leave for those who follow, just as the past left us Copernicus, Galileo, and Einstein? On a deeper level, Atlas feels like an invitation. It does not answer, it provokes. It does not conclude, it suggests. In its silence, Atlas hands the responsibility back to us, to keep asking, keep observing, keep learning. For the universe does not lack in wonders. What it lacks are eyes willing to search for them. And from this realization arises a renewed excitement. We are not at the end of the journey, but only at its prologue. In the end, as this chapter of history closes, Atlas leaves behind a dual legacy: a scientific challenge and a philosophical symbol. Science will continue to measure, analyze, and redraw its models. But philosophy and the human heart will continue to tremble before the unanswered question. It is precisely in that space of uncertainty that contemplation and awe become the essential emotions, keeping humanity both humble and daring. In this sense, Atlas has stepped out of the confines of orbital mechanics and entered the long epic of humankind. It is the next chapter, binding past, present, and future. And in that echo we come to understand the sky has never ceased to teach us, and every celestial body, whether a blazing star or a faint comet, can become a mirror in which we recognize ourselves. In the landscape of 21st century science, Atlas has become a case study, a vivid example of how a single phenomenon can shake multiple branches of knowledge at once. From the very moment it was discovered, Atlas forced scientists to expand their frame of vision, not merely to treat it as a comet, but as a flying laboratory holding data on gas physics, astrochemistry, orbital mechanics, and even the origins of the universe itself. Here, scientific astonishment reached a new intensity, because one small body seemed capable of destabilizing models that humanity had carefully built for centuries. The first point that drew attention was its unusual outgassing cycle. Comets typically vent gases in rhythms dictated by the solar heat they receive as they draw closer to the sunday. Yet Atlas displayed anomalous sublimation patterns, evaporation behaviors that did not match the expected thermal input. This led many researchers to propose that within Atlas lay a heterogeneous interior, perhaps containing ancient gas pockets sealed since the birth of another star system. Every spectroscopic reading of its escaping gases astonished observers, as if Atlas were revealing layer by layer the hidden memories of the cosmos through each plume of vapor. The second point was its non-standard orbit. Tracking data showed that Atlas experienced small accelerations that could not be fully explained by gravity alone. Non-gravitational acceleration is not unheard of among comets, but Atlas displayed it in a manner that was both extraordinary and persistent. Some argued this was the result of jet-like outflows exerting directional thrust. Others suspected it might signal the presence of some internal structure never before recognized. Whatever the explanation, the common reaction was scientific awe. Atlas forced us to consider that even our refined models of celestial mechanics were not yet sophisticated enough to account for everything unfolding in the outer dark. And finally, the most controversial feature of all, its polarization anomaly. When sunlight scattered off the dust surrounding Atlas, the degree of polarization deviated from the standard curve predicted by theory. This phenomenon baffled multiple research teams because it implied that Atlas's dust grains might differ in shape or chemical composition from those of every other comet ever studied. Some scientists even began referring to it as the optical signature of Atlas, a strange fingerprint that rendered it a truly unique object within the astronomical archive. Taken together, these anomalies, sublimation, orbital shifts, polarization, form a picture that is both unified and unsettling. Unified, because every observation points to the fact that Atlas diverges fundamentally from conventional comets. Unsettling, because no single explanation is robust enough to encompass them all, and it is here that reflection creeps in. Atlas reminds humanity that science, however advanced, remains a rough draft of the universe. Each time we believe we have achieved certainty, a body like Atlas appears to show us that the picture is still unfinished. Yet in that unfinished space lies the true power of scientific wonder. Atlas embodies the paradox of discovery. It is both a disruption and an invitation. It unsettles, because it undermines the neatness of our theories. But it also inspires, because it reopens the horizon of inquiry. Every irregular jet of gas, every unexplained acceleration, every strange scattering of light becomes not just a puzzle but a doorway. And through those doorways, science is compelled to move forward deeper into the unknown, propelled by the very astonishment that once threatened to unmoor it. In this sense, Atlas is not just a comet. It is a reminder, etched against the canvas of the solar system, that knowledge is never final. Our models are maps, not territories. They are sketches, not the landscape itself. And when a traveler like Atlas drifts into view, carrying with it anomalies that resist every attempt at easy classification, it is as though the universe itself is whispering, "The draft is not yet finished. Keep writing." Atlas is not merely a strange object for astronomers to argue over. It quickly became a point of interdisciplinary convergence, where entire fields were forced to sit together at the same table. On the surface, it is a comet. But deep in the data, Atlas touches multiple domains: astronomical spectroscopy, plasma physics, astrochemistry, orbital mechanics, even materials science and remote sensing technology. At this intersection, scientific astonishment reached its peak. A small drifting body in space somehow compelled the modern scientific community, diverse and specialized, to cooperate in search of a single answer. In astrochemistry labs, Atlas was seen as a time capsule, preserving compounds from the earliest phases of star system formation. Its overwhelming release of CO2, its anomalous nickel ratios, and its notable lack of iron all became precious data points for reconstructing the primordial recipe of cosmic dust clouds. Each molecule identified inspired astonishment because it might offer clues about how the first organic compounds formed, providing stepping stones toward the origins of life itself. In plasma physics, Atlas told a different story. The jets streaming from its surface refused to follow conventional models, producing plasma structures that defied prediction. Phenomena such as anomalous ion tails, unstable and shifting shapes that resisted mathematical description, forced physicists to ask unsettling questions. Was there an uneven distribution of charge within Atlas's core, something no one had ever recorded before? Each new observation was less a solution and more a fresh problem, and here the astonishment came not from the answers, but from the sheer scale of the questions that kept multiplying. For orbital mechanics specialists, Atlas was a living equation. Its trajectory resisted full explanation by gravitational forces alone. To simulate it, researchers had to introduce non-standard variables: reactive thrust from directed gas jets, the possibility of a hollow core, even speculation that Atlas originated in another star system and carried the imprint of entirely different conditions. Running these simulations required the world's most powerful supercomputers, and every new model left behind as many questions as it resolved. Here, contemplation took root. Perhaps humanity was glimpsing a new orbital language that had never been read before. Observation technology was pulled into the vortex as well. Ground-based optical telescopes, infrared satellites, and global networks of radio dishes all were mobilized to track Atlas's passage. This collaboration produced what some called a symphony of data, in which fields that often worked separately now had to merge their findings into a single, shared picture. Atlas, through its uncanny silence, had pushed modern science to demonstrate that its true power lies not in isolated disciplines, but in synthesis and cooperation. It was in this convergence that scientific astonishment was elevated to something greater. No longer awe at a single celestial body, but awe at the way humanity itself organizes knowledge. Atlas became a living reminder that the universe compels us to imitate its own patterns: connection, recycling, resonance. And as scientists watched each stream of data arrive, they were not merely seeing Atlas, they were, in some sense, seeing themselves reflected within it, a young civilization, assembling every tool and every fragment of intellect in an attempt to decode an ancient message. In that awareness, contemplation seeped into every thought. Atlas was no longer just a challenge for science, but a reminder of humility. For the more fields that became involved, the clearer the limitations of each field alone became. And it was in this very gap that humanity was reminded of something essential. The cosmos is larger than any system of classification, but generous enough to allow us to stitch fragments together, step by step, into a wider picture. Atlas, then, is more than anomaly and debate. It is a mirror held up to the scientific endeavor itself. It shows us not only what we know, but how we learn, how awe fuels inquiry, how humility guards against arrogance, how cooperation becomes our only path forward. And in that recognition, scientific astonishment becomes inseparable from contemplation, an emotional reminder that the quest to understand the universe is also the quest to understand ourselves. If the first observations of Atlas carried the thrill of scientific astonishment, the journey that followed revealed another, deeper layer of meaning. Atlas became a methodological lesson for the entire scientific community. It was not only a source of challenging data, but also a reminder of cognitive traps, model limitations, and the necessity of humility in research. Here, the wonder no longer came from its strange phenomena alone, but from the way Atlas forced science to reflect upon itself. The first lesson was about false positives, those deceptive signals that lurk within every observational discipline. From the famous wow signal of 1977 to the early radio pulses from pulsars once suspected to be alien intelligence, history has often witnessed excitement quickly turning into disillusionment. Atlas soon joined this lineage when some observing groups reported unusual spectral features and hastily linked them to extraterrestrial hypotheses. Yet when follow-up campaigns failed to reproduce those findings, the community had to pause and remind itself of a timeless truth. A single data point is never enough to build a reality upon. By muddying the waters in precisely this way, Atlas reinforced one of science's oldest principles. Progress depends on vigilance against the seduction of the extraordinary. The second lesson was about reproducible observations. Atlas compelled the scientific world to mobilize observatories across continents, across wavelengths, and across independent teams to verify every claim. When one group announced non-gravitational anomalies in its orbit, another recalculated. When one telescope reported polarization irregularities, another was immediately tasked with verification. It was as though global science had entered a kind of synchronized dance, where value did not lie in alone discovery but in repetition and consistency. The contemplative insight emerged here. Atlas reminded humanity that scientific truth is not a sudden flash but a steady light, sustained by countless acts of confirmation. Equally significant was the way Atlas exposed the limits of established models. The frameworks of comet physics built on centuries of observations repeatedly collapsed when applied to Atlas. Its sublimation rates, its orbital deviations, its polarization anomalies, none could be neatly wrapped inside existing equations. Scientists were forced to admit that they were confronting an outlier case. And paradoxically, it was this very impasse that generated a new wave of astonishment, the recognition that models once thought comprehensive were, in fact, drafts. Atlas, in its silence, pointed directly to their blind spots. This realization sparked a humbling kind of contemplation, that science, however powerful, is always unfinished. Atlas did not destroy science. It strengthened it by compelling it to adjust, revise, and expand. Just as every intellectual crisis in history, from Copernicus to Einstein, had reshaped the foundations of thought, Atlas delivered a smaller but no less meaningful jolt, reminding us that truth does not rest comfortably in our hands but always stretches beyond them. At a deeper level, Atlas demonstrated that the beauty of science lies precisely in uncertainty. If every phenomenon fit perfectly into our models, science would be reduced to a game of repetition. But anomalies like Atlas ignite intellectual revolutions, provoking awe and contemplation in equal measure. They remind us that when a model fails, it is not a period but an ellipsis, a pause before the next chapter begins. In this way, Atlas is more than a comet. It is a mirror reflecting the very process of knowledge-making. It warns against false positives, demands reproducibility, and humbles every model we construct. And through that, it preserves the essence of science, a discipline that thrives not on certainty, but on the courage to admit uncertainty and the resilience to keep asking. When all the data, debates, and hypotheses are laid out on the table, Atlas emerges not just as a strange celestial body, but as a mirror reflecting modern science. In that mirror, we see both the achievements of science and its shortcomings. Atlas stands as proof that the journey to understand the universe is never a straight line. It is a path full of detours, bends, and at times even dead ends. Yet from those dead ends, science forges new roads forward. The astonishment here does not come solely from Atlas itself, but from the way science responds to it with patience, rigor, and an inventive spirit. On the level of knowledge, Atlas reminds us that science is always a work in progress. No matter how sophisticated our models are, they remain draft sketches that the universe can erase at any moment. Atlas has exposed the gaps in cometary theory. We still do not fully understand the mechanics of gas sublimation. We do not fully grasp the behavior of polarized light in dusty environments, and we cannot yet explain its persistent non-gravitational accelerations. Yet rather than weakening science, this exposure makes it stronger. It forces us to expand our frameworks, to refine our theories, and to develop new technologies that can close these gaps. This is the true essence of scientific wonder, not fearing the unknown, but embracing the opportunity to confront it. On the human level, Atlas plants within us a profound sense of contemplation. In realizing how limited our knowledge still is, we also recognize our smallness in the cosmos. Humanity, despite all its modern instruments, remains a student in the vast classroom of the universe. Atlas resembles a silent teacher. It does not speak, but through its anomalies, it poses questions we cannot ignore. And within that silence lies a lesson in humility, that science is not a road to absolute truth, but an ongoing dialogue with the infinite. At the same time, Atlas fuels motivation for the future. It becomes a target for next-generation telescopes, a reason to invest in new space missions, a catalyst for deeper collaboration across disciplines. More than that, it becomes a symbol that inspires curiosity in millions. The students who marvel at Atlas today may be the scientists of tomorrow. The children who ask, "Why is Atlas so unusual?" are the seeds of the next generation of research. In this sense, Atlas is not just an object. It is a catalyst of knowledge, sparking chains of inquiry that will long outlive its passage through our skies. And perhaps this is its greatest legacy. Atlas is not merely data, it is inspiration. It not only challenges theories, it nourishes imagination. It does not simply expose limits, it opens paths forward. In Atlas's existence, we glimpse the nature of science itself, an unfinished process, a symphony without a final note, a journey that continues no matter how many times we must start again. When we look at Atlas, we feel awe at its complexity, reflection at our own fragility, recognition of the challenges it presents, and hope for what lies ahead. In that moment, Atlas transcends its identity as a comet and becomes a symbol of the longing to understand, of humility before the universe, and of the inexhaustible power of human curiosity. From its earliest observations, Atlas left the scientific community bewildered. But as data accumulated, another layer of emotion began to surface: awe and hope. No longer merely an astronomical anomaly, Atlas emerged as a cosmic sign, a symbol that could threaten as much as it could inspire. This emotional weight surpassed the neutral speculations of the earlier account, because it placed Atlas not only in the frame of astronomy, but also in the frame of existence itself. One hypothesis evoked profound awe. Atlas might be a node in a galactic network, a vast cosmic lattice where celestial bodies act as intermediaries. Like nerve fibers linking neurons in the brain, this network could serve as the infrastructure through which the universe transmits information, energy, or matter. If Atlas truly is a node in such a system, then its arrival in the solar system is no longer random, but a link in a structure far larger than human imagination can fathom. The thought instills a deep reverence. Perhaps the cosmos operates like a superintelligence, and humanity has only just brushed against one of its delicate threads. Alongside awe, there arose a parallel emotion: hope. For if such a galactic network exists, then Earth and the life it sustains is not an isolated accident, but part of a broader cosmic current. The feeling is akin to when humankind first saw the image of Earth from space: small, fragile, and yet a precious blue gem. With Atlas, Hope comes from the realization that we might not be alone, that we may belong to a story larger than ourselves. Yet in the shadow of that reflection flickers the anxiety of the dark forest. If Atlas is indeed a node in some cosmic network, could it also function as an instrument of observation, a galactic camera, quietly recording the existence of Earth's civilization? In that scenario, Atlas is not a mere passerby, but evidence that we have already been noticed. And if the survival rule of the dark forest is true, hide or perish, then to reveal our presence could be perilous. Here, the emotions collide, hope intertwined with unease, awe paired with the philosophy of survival. Within this paradox, Atlas becomes a philosophical mirror. It offers no answers, but forces us to confront ourselves. Do we wish to see the universe as a network of support, or as a dangerous forest? Do we choose to believe in connection, or in caution born of fear? The answer does not reside in Atlas, but within humanity itself. And it is in this very moment that awe and hope reach their peak, for Atlas has transformed from a block of ice and dust into an existential emblem, a reminder that the cosmos is always greater than our scientific models and always deeper than our philosophical speculations. Another hypothesis, at once strange and haunting, suggests that Atlas may be one of the cosmic couriers, messengers of the universe, wandering across star systems, carrying with them messages or material from distant worlds. At first, the idea sounds like pure science fiction, but the more we observe Atlas, the harder it becomes to dismiss from the imagination. Its anomalous orbit, unique composition, and unusual polarization signatures make Atlas appear less like a random clump of ice and dust, and more like a cosmic container carefully sealed to travel billions of kilometers through space. If this is true, then Atlas becomes evidence of a vast cosmic strategy, scattering seeds or messages across the stars without the sender needing to know the destination. Some planet, if fortunate enough, might one day cross paths with the courier and receive the gift. Perhaps organic compounds, perhaps information encoded in chemical structures, perhaps even the fingerprint of a civilization that once existed. This possibility stirs a deep sense of awe, for it suggests that humanity may be holding an ancient letter, written not by human hands, but by the universe itself, or by an intelligence far beyond. At the same time, hope radiates from the thought. If Atlas truly is a cosmic courier, then it means we are not alone. Somewhere, at some point, a civilization imagined the act of sending messages, of planting fragments of itself among the stars. This idea, though still without concrete proof, is enough to ignite the imagination of millions. Perhaps, in the vast expanse of the cosmos, there were once beings like us, curious, yearning, and desperate to leave a trace for the future. And yet, as with every beautiful hypothesis, the shadow of the dark forest lingers here as well. If Atlas is a cosmic courier, does it carry a message of goodwill? Or is it merely a locator beacon? Is it a gift or a trap? In a cosmic forest where every life form must hide to survive, a messenger wandering openly could just as easily serve as a tool for detection and destruction. Thus, anxiety walks hand in hand with hope. Atlas could be both angel and spy, and we have no way to know for sure. Within this paradox, Atlas becomes a philosophical metaphor. It forces humanity to ask, how do we choose to interpret a message from the universe? Do we trust in benevolence, or do we suspect malice? Do we open the door in faith, or keep it locked in fear? These questions are not only about Atlas, they are about the essence of humanity itself. Between trust and suspicion, between hope and dread, which emotion will we allow to shape our future? In this light, Atlas is no longer just a celestial object, but a test of spirit for an entire civilization. It compels us to look upward with awe, to hold tight to hope, to confront our fears, and to surrender ourselves to philosophical wonder. And it is precisely this tension that gives Atlas its value. It is not only a messenger from the universe, but also a messenger from the depths of the human mind. One of the most profound hypotheses is to see Atlas as a form of chemical memory, the universe's way of recording itself. Unlike a book written in letters, this memory is inscribed in molecular structures, in isotopic ratios, in ancient organic compounds. When a telescope captures the spectrum of Atlas, what we are reading is not merely dry data, but pages of a diary written in the chemical language of the cosmos. It is staggering to imagine that inside a drifting clump of ice and dust may lie fragments of memory, billions of years old compounds, forged in the dawn of a distant star system, or perhaps in the youth of the universe itself. Every molecule of methanol, every molecule of formaldehyde, every carbon grain within Atlas resembles a symbol, a note in the endless symphony of creation. To gaze upon them is to glimpse not only chemical composition, but condensed history, crystallized in matter. And it is this recognition that awakens a sense of awe. We may be touching the memory of the cosmos, holding fragments of testimony that time itself has not yet erased. Within that awe flickers a flame of hope, for if Atlas truly carries chemical memories, it may hold pieces of the greatest question of all. Where did life begin? Perhaps, buried in its core, lie complex organic compounds, the first letters in the alphabet of life. If such a discovery were ever confirmed, Atlas would cease to be merely a comet. It would become a messenger of life's memory, a custodian of beginnings. That hope, however fragile, is enough to make millions believe that we might yet find in the universe a continuity, a shared current of life, flowing across countless worlds. And yet, once more, the shadow of the dark forest intrudes. If Atlas's chemical memories do indeed contain traces of an alien biology, then it means life is not rare. And if life is not rare, the laws of competition and survival in the cosmos may be far harsher than we imagine. Atlas could be both a priceless archive and a warning. That curiosity itself can be dangerous, for what we uncover might bring us under the gaze of others in the cosmic forest. Thus, anxiety persists, inseparable from hope. Chemical memory may be both gift and doorway, leading us either to kinship or peril. In this tension, Atlas becomes a source of philosophical inspiration. It compels us to ask, does the universe's memory have purpose, or is it only a byproduct of chance? Do we have the right to decode every fragment of chemical memory, or must we learn to listen with reverence? In this role, Atlas is like an ancient book written in an undeciphered tongue, and humanity sits as a student before the first page. Perhaps the most important lesson lies not in what we manage to translate, but in the posture we adopt while holding the book. Awe before immensity, hope in the possibility of connection, and anxiety before the consequences of knowledge. Atlas, in this vision, is no longer a passing comet, but a philosophical mirror, reflecting not only the universe's memory, but our own readiness to confront it. When all the hypotheses are gathered, the vision of Atlas as a node in a galactic network, as a cosmic courier, and as a chemical memory, one pattern emerges. Atlas is no longer just a scientific phenomenon. It has become an existential symbol. It extends far beyond the identity of a comet, for each perspective reveals a different dimension of feeling. Awe before the vastness of the cosmos, hope for connection, anxiety in the shadow of the dark forest, and philosophical inspiration about the essence of existence. In the galactic network perspective, Atlas reminds us that perhaps the universe is not chaos, but order, a web in which every celestial body acts as a point of connection. This idea inspires awe, the possibility that the universe itself may function like a colossal brain, with information and energy coursing through nodes such as Atlas. Yet at the same time, it stirs hope that humanity is not alone, that our existence is part of a larger structure, that our fragile lives may indeed carry meaning within the grander flow. In the cosmic courier perspective, Atlas transforms into a messenger, carrying materials or messages from other civilizations. The image evokes awe. Perhaps we are holding an ancient cosmic letter sent millions of years ago. Yet it also nurtures hope. Somewhere out there, another intelligence once yearned to connect, once scattered fragments of its being into the void, hoping that someday, someone would find them. But here too, the shadow of the dark forest flickers. What if this messenger is not a gift but a probe? What if Atlas is not only a carrier, but also evidence that we have already been marked? Anxiety seeps into belief, deepening the sense of reflection. In the chemical memory perspective, Atlas becomes a vault of cosmic history. Its organic compounds, isotopic ratios, and chemical traces are like diaries of worlds long gone. To gaze upon them is to feel awe, as though one were reading ancient texts inscribed in the language of atoms. Yet it also awakens hope that within those unread pages, we might find clues to the oldest question of all. Where did life begin, and might it arise again elsewhere? This hypothesis, rich with philosophical inspiration, frames Atlas as an untranslated book, forcing us to ask not only about its contents, but about our own attitude in reading it. Do we have the humility to listen, or are we too impatient, rushing only to extract answers for ourselves? When these three visions overlap, Atlas appears as a many-faced mirror. Each person, each discipline, each generation may look into it and see a different reflection. For the scientist, it is a challenge of data. For the philosopher, it is an existential symbol. For the public, it is a source of inspiration that sows both fear and hope. And it is this very multiplicity that defines Atlas's supreme value. It compels humanity to pause, to listen, to reflect. Ultimately, Atlas has given us a lesson that goes beyond science. The universe is not only a realm to be measured, but a realm to be conversed with. A comet can be an experimental tool, but it can also be a messenger, a book, a mirror. In all these roles, Atlas teaches us that awe and hope are not opposites but companions. It is precisely in the tension between anxiety and hope, between knowledge and mystery, between data and philosophy, that humanity finds the strength to move forward. In this way, Atlas ceases to be a mere traveler through the solar system. It becomes part of humanity's spiritual narrative, a reminder that the sky is never only stars and dust, but always symbols that make us tremble and dream. And perhaps Atlas's greatest legacy does not lie in what it truly is, but in how it forces us to confront ourselves. When the final light of Atlas faded from the lenses of telescopes, what remained was not emptiness, but a field of stillness that seemed to drape itself over humanity. It was like the silence after a great symphony ends, when the reverberations still echo in the chest, long after the last note has vanished. Atlas, by disappearing, left behind not a void but a celestial mirror, a cosmic reflection in which humanity could see itself. No more data, no more debates, only silence and a question lingering in the air. What have we learned from this fateful encounter? In that mirror, we saw our own smallness, but also our resilience, a civilization capable of pausing to reflect, of asking questions that reach beyond the boundaries of science and politics. Atlas was no longer just a comet. It had become an appointment with destiny, a meeting the universe had arranged for us. No invitation was sent, no preparation made, and yet when the moment arrived, the whole of humanity lifted its gaze in unison, listening together to the silence of the sky. And it was in that silence that awe rose to its fullest height. Not awe in the face of a threat, but awe before the boundless ability of the universe to generate meaning. A drifting ball of ice and dust, something that might easily have been dismissed as trivial, suddenly became a teacher, a mirror, a messenger. In this realization, we understood. Meaning does not reside in the object itself, but in the way we choose to see it. Atlas, through its quiet passing, had taught us a lesson about listening to the universe. Alongside awe came a current of hope. For if a comet could alter the way we think, how many more appointments with destiny might still lie ahead? Perhaps tomorrow, a signal from the deep will sound. Perhaps a century from now, another celestial visitor will sweep by. Atlas became a promise that the universe will not remain silent forever, that every stillness is only an interlude before a new chapter begins. This hope reaches not only outward but inward as well, a belief that humanity can grow from each encounter, that we can emerge more profound from every stretch of silence. Above all, what resonated most was the stillness itself. Not a frightening silence, but a healing one, like sitting alone under a night sky far from the city, when the only sound is your breath blending with the wind. Atlas, in its departure, had gifted us that, a moment of collective stillness, in which millions of people, across time zones and continents, paused together, lifted their heads, and reflected. And in that stillness, we did not feel loss. We felt a cosmic seed, a seed of the universe planted in our minds, waiting to grow into knowledge, into philosophy, into art, into new dreams yet to come. If the silence Atlas left behind was fertile ground, then it was also a cosmic seed, a seed of the universe planted deep within humanity. Not a visible seed of matter, but one made of questions, wonder, awe, and hope. From the moment Atlas faded, many realized they no longer looked at the night sky with the same eyes. For in that sky now lived not only stars and planets, but a memory, the memory that once the universe had sent us a silent but stirring guest. Like every seed, Atlas sowed the beginnings of knowledge. Laboratories continue to analyze their remaining data. Philosophers write new reflections. Artists craft works inspired by their passing. Atlas left behind more than traces in the telescopes. It left marks in culture, in spirit. A child who reads about Atlas today may one day become a scientist, a poet, or a philosopher. In this way, Atlas has sown seeds for a harvest not yet here, but certain to arrive. Beyond knowledge, Atlas also planted faith. In a world often shrouded by headlines of crisis, war, and climate change, the appearance of Atlas reminded us that there are forces beyond human control, and not all of them are destructive. Atlas brought no catastrophe, only questions. It did not plant fear, but reflection, and that alone gave people hope, that the universe, in all its immensity, still offers us gifts, not always answers, but opportunities to grow deeper. The image of a cosmic seed also suggests that Atlas might be part of a much larger process, the way the universe itself sows life and meaning. If within Atlas lie ancient organic compounds, then perhaps on some distant planet, a similar seed once sparked life. If Atlas is just one among countless messengers, then the cosmos may already have scattered its seeds everywhere, waiting for the right conditions to bloom. That realization inspires both awe at the vastness of the cosmic design and hope that life is not confined to Earth alone. And even if Atlas carried nothing more than ice and dust, the silence it left would still be enough of a seed. For that, silence compelled humanity to pause together, and individuals to ask themselves about their place in the whole. It was the seed of spirit, of philosophy, of art, of faith, the belief that meaning can be found even in quiet. As one philosopher once said, the universe does not always give answers, but even its silence is a form of dialogue. Atlas, in its role as cosmic seed, transformed silence into language, absence into presence. For this reason, when we look back on Atlas, we cannot think only of the departure of a celestial body. We must think of the seed it left behind, a seed that does not lie solely in NASA's databases, but within the human heart. And that seed will keep sprouting, keep spreading, as part of the long dialogue between humanity and the universe. There are moments in human history we can only call appointments with destiny encounters not arranged by human hands, but by the universe itself. Atlas was one of those moments. It appeared without warning, slipped across the sky like a passing stranger, and yet left behind a silence deeper than any other astronomical event of the century. What made it extraordinary was how different it was from earlier appointments. When humanity first saw Earth from space, we were struck by its fragile beauty. When the Hubble Space Telescope unveiled thousands of galaxies, we were overwhelmed by the grandeur of the cosmos. Atlas, however, did not arrive to dazzle us with radiant images. It arrived to offer silence. It did not steal our breath with brilliance, but left us speechless with questions that had no answers. It was like a mysterious guest who knocked at the door and vanished, leaving us alone with ourselves. In its absence, we felt its most powerful presence. In a philosophical sense, an appointment with destiny is never accidental. It is like stumbling upon a book, a melody, or a gaze that changes you forever. Atlas was that kind of encounter. It came unannounced, yet precisely at the moment when humanity needed to pause, to reflect, to hold up a mirror and face itself. Amid the noise of the world, Atlas delivered silence. Amid the chaos of endless information, it brought forth a primordial question. Thus, deep contemplation became the dominant response. Looking back on Atlas as an appointment with destiny, we realize it was not we who sought it out. The universe chose us to experience it. And within that sense of being chosen arose awe, the feeling of having been given a rare privilege to glimpse a hidden fragment of the cosmos that not every generation is granted. Not every era has its Atlas, and that scarcity made the moment sacred. Alongside awe flowed a current of hope. For if the universe can deliver appointments with destiny such as Atlas, surely it will knock again. Perhaps with another wandering celestial body, perhaps with a distant radio signal, perhaps with some rare cosmic event yet to unfold. What is certain is this: the universe never lets humanity drift through history without leaving reminders. Atlas was one such reminder. Pause, reflect, keep the flame of curiosity burning. And in the stillness, we began to understand. Appointments with destiny do not require thunderclaps or blinding light. They can be as simple as a fading trace across the night sky, a moment of silence that makes us look upward, an event that compels all of humanity to ask the same question at once. Atlas, in its quiet mystery, fulfilled that role perfectly. It did not need to explain itself, for its very refusal to explain was already the message. When all the noise of debate had faded, when the scientific reports had been filed away in archives, Atlas remained not in the sky, but in the human mind. It endures as a celestial mirror, a cosmic reflection in which every generation may look and glimpse its own image. What we see is not merely the silhouette of a comet, but the outline of a small civilization that once lifted its gaze, that once fell silent before the mystery of the universe. In that mirror, humanity beholds the deep contemplation that Atlas awakened. It forced us to ask questions that admit no immediate answers. Who are we in the cosmos? Why do we exist at all? The moment felt like looking into a mirror and meeting our own eyes, not to confirm appearances, but to recognize the depth of the soul. Atlas became such a mirror, reflecting not data, but the essence of our being in relation to the infinite. The feeling of awe grows stronger when we realize that this mirror was not crafted by human hands. It was not a philosophy, nor a monument, nor an engineered artifact. It was a gift from the universe, a drifting shard of matter that happened to pass by, yet carried the power to make an entire planet pause. This chance encounter deepened the sense of reverence, as though the universe were whispering that the sacred does not need temples, for it can appear in the humblest of forms. In that reflection, we also find a current of hope. Hope that each time we look in the mirror, we will discover a reason to continue. Hope that Atlas is but one of many mirrors the cosmos will send across the path of humankind. Hope that silence itself is not emptiness, but a space where new meaning may be sown. Like a cosmic seed, this mirror will go on sprouting within our thoughts, our dreams, and the knowledge of generations to come. Above all, what Atlas left behind was stillness. Not the stillness of absence, but of profound presence. It was like standing before the ocean at night, hearing nothing but waves, seeing nothing but darkness, yet feeling mysteriously embraced. In its silence, Atlas granted humanity that state. A pause that heals. A moment to breathe, to stop racing, to simply exist. And perhaps this is Atlas's ultimate legacy. Not orbital data, not theories of origin, but a state of spirit. It reminds us that sometimes the question matters more than the answer, that sometimes presence is less important than silence, that sometimes meaning is not in what the universe says, but in our ability to sit quietly, to listen, and to see ourselves reflected in that cosmic mirror. Atlas has departed, but the mirror remains, and each time we lift our eyes to the night sky in deep contemplation, in awe, in hope, in stillness, we will see Atlas once more, not as a celestial body, but as an inseparable part of the human soul.